This boy was abandoned in the worst way possible. In this world, trash doesn't get help. He was humiliated for being an orphan. His name was Ray, a cold boy with no emotions. He lost everything he had to the organization of mages. But what they didn't know is that this boy possesses a type of mana that no one else can control. At the age of 14, Ray began to learn magic. His talent was so absurd that it surpassed even the nobles. He became a prismatic genius in a world where magic is worshipped as absolute power. In a desolate place called Sector 50, everything looks abandoned and ruined. Racing through the streets, kids seem to be fleeing something urgent. Hidden behind scrap metal, two boys watch the commotion. Suddenly, a massive stone golem appears. One boy warns that it's here. Getting closer, a boy offers up a flashlight, asking for food in exchange. Rumor has it, a golem of unknown origin exists in this sector. If you give it scrap, the creature supposedly hands over food in return. The golem seems to scan the offered object with its eyes, but to everyone's surprise, the golem simply turns and walks away. The boy yells, asking where it's going, since it took a flashlight just yesterday. Watching this, one wants to attack, but his friend holds him back, telling him to wait. Nearby, a hooded youth hears that golems have been attacking people in the street. Landing on the ground, he faces down the stone creature. Offering his backpack, he tells the creature to take what's inside. The stone creature observes the boy closely with its eye. Then, the golem reaches out and takes one of the items from the bag. Holding the item, the golem stands up and stares at the hooded boy. Watching the scene, the other boys can't believe he's going to get so much stuff. Then, from its hand, the golem dumps a pile of food into the backpack. Confused, one of the kids yells that it doesn't make any sense. As he walks away, the others call him the ghost of 17th Street. Changing scenes, the entrance to 17th Street looks deserted and ruined. Carrying the backpack, he walks alone down a very narrow, dark alley. His steps take him deeper into the alley as he moves forward. But right behind him, other people start following silently. Stopping suddenly, he announces that he's noticed the presence of 7 people there. Turning around, he asks how long they're going to keep following him like that. Emerging from the alley, a group of men surrounds him. The leader praises his senses. Calling the leader Ron, he reminds him that he already warned him last time. He reinforces the promise that Ron wouldn't walk again if he showed his face. Laughing at the threat, the leader orders him to put the backpack down immediately. He guarantees that if the youth does that, they'll let him go. Without hesitating, the hooded youth calls him a liar in front of everyone. He asserts that he knows the leader won't let him go in peace. With that, he mentions there's a famous saying among the local kids. They say a white ghost walks silently down 17th Street with no expression, and the saying warns not to look into the ghost's eyes, or your lies will be discovered. Enraged, the group leader clenches his brass knuckles tightly. Yelling that he's an arrogant brat, the leader runs to attack him. He charges forward, saying he'll ensure the youth never speaks like that again. Dodging the attack, the youth easily sidesteps his opponent's punch. After missing the blow, the leader loses his balance and flies right past him. Grabbing the leader by the shirt, he readies himself for the next move. Then he lands a devastating punch right in his rival's stomach. Falling to the ground, the leader spits, totally stunned by the impact. With their leader defeated, the other group members shout his name. Seeing the scene, one of the goons angrily calls him a bastard. Then, they yell for everyone to charge and finish him off once and for all. Wielding bats, they all run toward him to attack as a group. Getting close, one attacker tries to land a blow with a bat. With a quick movement, he manages to deflect the attack coming from above. Right after, he counterattacks with a precise punch to the aggressor's chin. Being thrown backward, a companion shouts his name upon seeing the scene. Wasting no time, he turns and hits another gang member. After taking down one more, he faces the rest of the approaching group. Continuing the fight, he takes down the gang members one by one. Standing over the bodies, he warns that bringing more people won't change anything. Defeated on the ground, the leader calls him a monster, too weak to get up. As he approaches, the leader yells for him not to come any closer. With a serious look, he tells Ron that he had already warned him before. He reinforces the promise that he would ensure Ron could never walk again. Hiding his hand behind his back, the leader pulls a knife while cursing him. Lunging forward, he attacks with the knife and yells for the monster to stay away. And seeing his reflection, he admits that maybe the monster accusation is true. Going back in time, he remembers noticing he was different at age 10. In a memory, he appears with an injured leg, showing no pain. Other kids ask why he isn't crying, and he questions the reason. In another moment, a friend asks why he doesn't get angry. In front of a grave, his friend cries and asks what to do now. Seeing no tears from him, his friend calls him scary for not crying. Then, the boy tells the other to leave. leaving him completely alone. Alone under the moon, he understood that he couldn't feel what they call emotions. Looking at the sky, he wonders if he was the one wrong the whole time. With outstretched hand, he shows that he just wanted to be like other people. He wondered if someday he would learn what these so-called emotions were, but he knows how to read others' emotions, citing the rule about not using blades. Back in the present, he asks if Ron planned to use the knife from the start. He asserts that Ron is lying because he can see the color in his chest. According to him, his power allows him to see a world that no one else can perceive. In that world, feelings like anger and love manifest as mana of different colors. Because of this, he is able to see the world around him full of colors. Knife in hand, Ron threatens to stab him for real if he gets close. Seeing the dark energy, he identifies that it is intense fear. Completely ignoring the threat, he walks slowly toward the gang leader. Totally paralyzed, the gang leader can barely move from so much fear. Holding energy in his hand, he says a liar like Ron will always deserve to be properly punished. Heavy rain falls as he walks alone down a pitch-black underground passage. He continues across an empty courtyard, heading toward his destination. Pulling aside a curtain, he enters the hideout. Someone is calling his name. Inside, Pale, the children's leader, tells him he's right on time. Suddenly, the kids swarm him. Pale tells them to settle down. They sit in a circle. Pale says it's time to review today's haul. On the floor, there are only a few coins and a single piece of bread. Looking at it, Pale asks if it's possible to split that among 7 people. Silence falls. The children just stare, waiting for his answer. That's when he reveals his bag. It is stuffed full of assorted food. One boy asks how he got all that from the golem without trading anything. It turns out the golem only accepts items containing residual mana. Pale smiles. Thanks to him, no one will go hungry today. He begins dividing the food, handing the first portion to the youngest child. While the others eat, he turns and leaves without a word. Sitting alone in the rain, he regrets not having enough food for everyone. He looks at a warehouse, wondering if he really needs to go there. He resolves that it's his duty to support the group that saved his life. Flashback to a year ago. He was completely buried under cold snow. A group of children found him and decided to dig him out. As he was being rescued, he thought it wouldn't be so bad to die like that. When he woke up, he was surrounded by the kids, asking if he was okay. Seeing his eyes open, the children were relieved he was safe. Back in the present, he reinforces his principle. Always pay your debts. Back at the hideout, Pale calls him over for a private chat. As he approaches, Pale insists that he needs to take his share of the food too, but he refuses the offer. He says he's fine. He isn't hungry. Pale smiles and jokes that his stomach seems to disagree. Pale breaks a cookie in half, saying it's best to share. Offering the food, Pale asks Ray if he notices anything. Pale comments that it's raining black right now. Ray simply agrees. Pale explains that mages live in the lower numbered sectors. He suggests the golem must have been sent by a mage. But then Ray changes his mind. He says that's not it. Pale smiles, insisting that magic definitely moves the creature. Staring into space, Pale seems awestruck by the idea of real magic. The truth is, the golem pulls in all the mana around it. That energy is then expelled from its body as a dark gas. The strong connection between the dark rain and the golem's gas becomes clear. Seeing Ray stand up, Pale calls his name, sounding worried. On his feet, Ray says he's going out and tells them to watch the river closely. Ignoring Pale's vain attempts to stop him, he runs out into the rain. Watching his friend leave, Pale complains that he always does whatever he wants. Outside, dark rain falls heavily on the completely deserted streets. Splashing through the water, he moves forward while everyone else hides from the rain. Everyone believes the dark rain causes sickness, so the streets are empty. Using his ability, he shields himself from the rain and keeps walking without issue. Since he can protect himself, he finds working on these days much easier. Arriving at 18th Street, he finds the ration warehouse belonging to a guy named Hector. Inside, 2 guards are betting on a card game, completely distracted. Seeing the light on confirms it. They always play on rainy days. Seizing the chance, he slips through a hole in the fence into the warehouse yard. Once inside, he notes that the place is dark and security is weak. Drawing mana from the air, he mixes the right colors following a specific formula. His eyes fixed, he concentrates on controlling all that energy. A small flame, formed from mana, appears in the palm of his hand. Holding the fire, he prepares to use the magic he just created. Even without knowing the principles, he finds controlling red mana difficult. He wonders if he could create a bigger fire, if he could feel the emotions connected to it. Suddenly, a knife grazes him, nicking his ear. Appearing out of nowhere, one of the guards laughs, calling him fast. Positioned above, 3 guards surround him and call him a rat. Analyzing the situation, he realizes there are 3 of them, and they all know his location. He notices one guard wearing special night vision goggles. Smiling, the equipped guard spins a knife in his hand. Suddenly, the 3 throw multiple knives at him simultaneously. With a fixed gaze, he prepares to react to their coordinated attack. Moving quickly, he uses his speed to dodge the knives. Seeing this, the guard is shocked, unable to understand what this boy is. While one yells to aim better, he charges at one of the guards. Leaping up, he lands a powerful blow right to the opponent's face. Seeing their friend down, the others can't understand how he can see them, but with his gaze, he can track their every movement in the dark. He can see the anger and surprise emanating from the two guards. Yelling at him not to act tough, one throws a knife. With his speed, he dodges it easily. By reading the energy flow, he can predict his enemy's movements. This way, he knows exactly what strike they will attempt next. Taking a firm step, he prepares to launch his counterattack. With a quick spin, he lands a powerful kick on the closest guard. The blow connects solidly, the force throwing the opponent aside. Disbelieving, the guard screams that what he did is completely impossible. Telling him he's wrong, Ray advances for the next attack with his fist. Flung backward, the guard screams as he hits the ground with impact. Defeated, the man falls to his knees, unable to rise. After taking them all down, he stands silently in the middle of the warehouse. Looking toward the door, he sees a new person approaching. Arriving, the man says he came to check on the cause of all the mess. Seeing the three on the floor, the executive, Humphrey, realizes they have been defeated. With a smile on his face, he seems to be preparing for a fight. Then he notes that all three were defeated by a single small rat. At the back of the warehouse, the two opponents faced off, ready for battle. He saw the executive, called him a rat, and braced for combat. Standing before Humphrey, he realized he needed to escape immediately. He charged, aiming a straight punch at his new opponent. He threw the punch with every ounce of strength he had. To his shock, Humphrey didn't even flinch from the impact. Wide-eyed, he challenged Humphrey to dodge his next attack. The executive came down hard with an open-hand strike. Dodging just in time, he realized the enemy's speed was impressive. Humphrey didn't stop. He tried a kick, but Ray managed to roll out of the way. Standing tall, the executive commented that the kid was actually too fast for him. Staring down his enemy, Ray realized Humphrey was on a completely different level. The executive adopted a fighting stance, ready to attack again. Ray kept his guard up, bracing for the incoming assault. He didn't know why, but he felt he couldn't win this head-on fight. He slipped past the executive's incoming punch. Since he couldn't win hand-to-hand, he decided on a new strategy. Lowering his guard, he prepared to target his opponent's weak points. As the executive attacked, Ray dodged and readied a precise counter. Concentrating mana into his hand, he created a small fireball. Seizing the opening, he blasted the magic straight into Humphrey's chest. Feeling the impact, the executive recoiled. Surprised by the attack, Humphrey looked up, realizing his opponent had vanished. The kid had managed to escape. Outside, Humphrey yelled for the guards to find him, knowing he hadn't gone far. Watching from a distance, Ray knew they would soon find his hiding spot. Crouched low, he hid behind a fence as the guards approached. Then, one of the guards spotted movement near the entrance. Screaming threats to kill him, the guard ordered everyone after the boy immediately. As he ran, Ray celebrated successfully robbing the Hector Group's warehouse. But he knew he couldn't be caught. They would kill him if they found him. Even though he wasn't afraid to die, he kept running without pausing for a second. If he was gone, the children he protected wouldn't last long alone. Sprinting through the forest, he regretted not being able to repay his debt to them. Suddenly, a guard found him and shouted his location to the others. Taken by surprise, Ray went on high alert, knowing he'd been discovered. With no other choice, he ran, the guards yelling for everyone to catch him. He stopped abruptly, realizing he'd hit a dead-end alley. Cornered, one guard sneered that he had nowhere left to run. Wielding a knife, the guard demanded Ray hand over what he stole before attacking. Looking around, Ray noticed Humphrey was no longer with the guards. Without the executive nearby, he knew he had a winning chance now. When Ray didn't reply, the guard advanced, calling him a deaf brat. With a quick movement, Ray dodged the knife and struck his opponent's arm. He followed up with a powerful blow to the guard's face. Seeing his friend down, the other guard prepared to attack Ray from behind. Ray managed to grab the guard's fist, stopping the attack cold. Confused, the guard wondered how the boy could be so strong. Clasping his hands, Ray concentrated energy for a magical counterattack. With a precise strike, he blasted the last guard right in the face. The guard hit the ground hard, unconscious, ending the fight instantly. Hearing more noise, Ray knew he couldn't rely on his magic forever. Spotting a nearby dumpster, he had an idea for escape. The guards arrived at the alley, wondering where he'd run and searching for him. Outside, the sound of their footsteps began to fade into the distance. Peeking out, he confirmed they hadn't found him hidden inside. He decided to spend the night there to keep the children out of danger. Outside, the rain fell hard while he remained hidden from view. Exhausted, he wondered when the rain would finally stop. The next day, The sky dawned slightly overcast, but rainless. Opening his eyes, he realized he had fallen asleep right there. Climbing out of the dumpster, he believed the coast was clear, but a voice startled him, saying they had finally found him hiding there. One of the guards stood there staring at him with a knife hidden behind his back. Smiling, the guard asked if it wasn't a good thing he had come back. Ray drew his own knife, noting the guard's rage, though he hadn't fully recovered himself. Seeing the weapon, the guard sarcastically praised him, calling him a man. Then he warned he wouldn't hold back and charged in full force. Screaming that he was going to kill him, the guard ran to deliver the final blow. Dodging by a hair, Ray slipped right under his opponent's arm. Furious, the guard whirled around, determined not to let him escape. He attacked again, unleashing a circular strike with all his might. Ray lost his balance and fell, leaving himself completely exposed. Seizing the opportunity, the guard said goodbye to the fallen brat. Unable to move, Ray just stared at the blade coming toward him. Aiming for his eye, the knife descended swiftly for the final, precise kill. Suddenly, the guard's body crashed heavily onto the alley floor. With a dirty face, Ray looked up at the person who had just arrived. The guard attacking him was now lying on the ground behind the newcomer. A man stood there, pointing a gun in his direction, interrupting the fight. Smiling, the man warned Ray that the situation had been very dangerous. After speaking, he calmly lit a cigarette with a metal lighter. He held the cigarette and surveyed the chaotic scene. Identifying himself as the boss of 17th Street, he asked the reason for such a mess so early in the morning. Seeing Ray awake, Niles asked if someone had called him up so early. He explained that he'd heard Hector's men were prowling the area. Asking about the cans, he questioned if Ray had snatched them from Hector, calling him bold. Ray thanked him, but Niles warned it wasn't a compliment. The boy admitted it had been difficult. With a lost look, Ray turned his face away and fell silent for a moment. Niles simply lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke without another word. He warned Ray that he could die like that, but the boy said they would starve anyway. Claiming the debt was paid, Niles revealed he had only saved him by mistake. Ray countered that he survived thanks to him, as Niles began to walk away. Then, Ray stated that the debt between them had been paid long ago. Flashing back a year, the scene showed Ray dragging Niles' body out of a river. In exchange for being saved, Niles had trained him, teaching him how to fight. Back in the present, Ray called out to him. Niles stomped out his cigarette, asking what he wanted. Remembering their previous conversation, Ray approached to talk about his organization. With a firm look, he finally decided and announced he was joining the group. Hearing the answer, Niles just stared at him silently for a moment. Then he turned and started walking, moving away from the boy. He stopped walking and called Ray by name without looking back. He asked if Ray could use magic, making the boy question how he knew that. Grabbing Ray, he said it was true and asked what he knew about magic. Niles explained that he only knew what he had asked a mage from his old organization. Ray then asked if the mage had said anything about colors, but Niles completely denied it. Confused, the boy wondered what it was that he was seeing. Irritated, Niles glared at him and asked if he wanted a beating. He tried to throw a punch, but Ray easily dodged his attack. Then he asked for the answer to his request, and Ray simply said no. Not understanding, Niles asked why he was suddenly rejecting him. Niles then explained that all the sectors were located along the Elton River. He said it would be a waste for a boy with such skills to die there. Offering a car, Niles suggested he flee, but Ray refused in order to take care of the children. Telling him not to worry, Niles revealed he was thinking of starting an orphanage there. Placing his hand on Ray's head, Niles said he would take in orphans just like him. Watching Niles, Ray concluded he was probably telling the truth, as always. He then warned Ray to be careful, as Hector seemed to be preparing for war. Ray remembered seeing the man receiving several trucks loaded with weapons. Making a gun gesture with his hand, Niles confirmed that he already knew everything. Using live ammunition in any conflict meant a definitive declaration of war. Ray said people would suffer if he lost, but Niles defended himself. Annoyed, Niles asked him to stop treating him like an old man, but Ray confirmed it. He tried to land a blow again, but Ray managed to dodge one more time. One of his men then called him, warning that they needed to leave. Getting into the car, he told Ray to find another hideout and toss something to him. Confused, Ray caught the object thrown in his direction. Seeing it was a small vial, the boy asked what it was. From inside the car, Niles just told him to sanitize his ear. Watching the car drive away, Ray stood in the middle of the dusty street. He remained there in silence, just holding the collar of his jacket. Changing scenes, the story takes us to 17th Street, near the square. A boy saw him and ran over, shouting Ray's name excitedly. Getting closer, he asked why Ray hadn't come home yesterday. Suddenly, he noticed the bruises and asked why Ray was so hurt. Worried, the boy questioned if he had been in a fight, but Ray said he just fell. Crying, the little boy rubbed his eyes and lamented that it must have hurt a lot. Handing over the cans, Ray asked him to go ahead and warn Pale. Then the boy ran off, leaving Ray behind with the old lady. Approaching, he asked Viola if she had told Josephine anything. With a smile, Viola replied that she was just talking about rainbows. He asked her not to tell them those things, but Viola said children need to dream. Ray just stared at her silently, with a very fixed and serious look. He continued watching the lady sitting there, focusing all his attention on her. Warning about the war, he told Viola to move to another street. He then turned and walked away, leaving the lady behind alone. By the next morning, he was knocking on a door, announcing a delivery. Surprised to see him, the man said Ron was supposed to make the deliveries. Asking if he was going to evacuate, Ray heard that the man wouldn't leave his shop. Then the man said the war might not even happen, leaving Ray confused. Pointing to a door, he revealed that Hector and Niles were talking in there. Then, the door to the room finally began to open slowly. Hector and his men stepped out with serious air. Staring down everyone, Hector revealed himself as the boss of 18th Street. Upon seeing Ray, Hector commented on a boy working where adults had fled. Grabbing his head, Hector told him to keep working hard. He then handed him a few coins to buy himself a treat. Telling his men to move out, Hector left and Ray just said goodbye. Focusing on his ear, he noticed the injury there. Stopping suddenly, the bald man named Humphrey stared at Ray seriously. With his hood covering his face, Ray realized he had been recognized by him. Before leaving, Humphrey cast one last serious look in the boy's direction. From inside the car, Hector called him, and Humphrey acknowledged he was coming. Watching them finally leave, the shop owner breathed a huge sigh of relief. Removing the device, Ray understood that he had recognized the injury on his ear. Running into the shop, the man screamed desperately for Niles, looking for him. Inside, they found Niles smoking a cigarette with a very tense expression. Sitting down, he simply announced to both of them that the negotiation had failed. With a cold look, he confirmed that there would now be a war between them. The shopkeeper is shocked by the news and asks Niles if it's true. Niles lays out the ridiculous terms while the man laments over his shop. Niles then warns Ray not to leave the hideout for now. Without saying a word, Ray just turns around and walks right out of the establishment. Walking down the street, worry about the war sets in. He decides he needs to stockpile as much food as possible beforehand. Suddenly, a sports car tears past him at high speed. Inside, he recognizes the driver, Humphrey. Finding the situation suspicious, he thinks it's odd to see a car like that around here. Decided, he realizes he needs to investigate what's happening. Trailing the vehicle, he watches it arrive at Hector's group base. Outside, Hector and his men are already waiting for its arrival. Then, a mysterious person starts getting out of the back seat of the car. An elegant man steps out and is welcomed by the guards as if he were a mage. From his hiding spot, Ray wonders who that mysterious man could be. Analyzing the power, he perceives an immense amount, on par with the golems. He then wonders what those rings around the man's core are. Noticing the mana in the rings, he understands they serve to contain the power. After observing everything, he concludes that the man is very dangerous. Deciding to warn Niles, he runs to grab some supplies and weapons. Changing scenes, Niles' group is hurriedly moving crates of supplies. One member looks around and asks where Niles is. Suddenly, Ray appears behind him, taking the man completely by surprise. Calmly, he mentions the gate was open and asks for Niles. The man explains that the boss went out to prepare and tells Ray to leave. Ray then asks the man to deliver an important message to his boss. Watch out for the man wearing an elegant monocle. With rain falling, the scene shifts to a dark, deserted alley. In a shelter, a family takes cover from the brewing conflict. Sitting on the floor, Ray hears another boy say the war won't last long. He asks who will win, but Ray admits he doesn't know for sure. Even so, he knows Niles needs to win for the safety of the children. If Hector wins the war, the street kids will be sold as slaves. Suddenly, a loud noise makes the boy say the war has started. Startled by the sound, they both look in the same direction, confused. Seeing Ray's reaction, the boy asks if he heard it too. He says he's never heard anything like that before. Cut to 17th Street, where Niles' men are firing non-stop. They suddenly cease fire, staring ahead in total surprise. A giant golem emerges, and they scream that their shots aren't working. Then the creature raises its arm, preparing a direct attack against them. Firing a powerful strike, the golem hits the street with tremendous force. The impact disintegrates one soldier and throws the other backward. Lying on the ground, the survivor stares at the scene, unable to comprehend what just happened. Standing there, the golem just watches the single soldier who survived the attack. Staring back at the golem, the soldier remains on the ground, trapped with nowhere to run. Without any mercy, the golem advances and attacks the last remaining soldier. Blood from the attack ends up splashing onto a nearby umbrella. The man holding the umbrella complains that the place smells like sewage. Looking at the creature, He confirms that this golem is his own creation. With a smile on his face, he then orders them to clean everything up in that location. Back in the alley, Pale realizes the noise is getting louder. Seeing Ray prepare to leave, Pale grabs him and asks where he thinks he's going. Desperate, he begs to go along with Ray if he's really leaving. Without changing his mind, Ray just tells Pale to wait right there for him. Suddenly, another boy appears and asks why they are still awake. Calming the boy, Pale asks him to go back to sleep because they will be back soon. Watching this scene, Ray turns and softly calls Pale's name. Understanding the situation, Pale agrees and says he will stay with the other children. He confirms he can't abandon them, then pauses before continuing. Asking him not to go far, Pale hears Ray promise he'll return soon. Ray walks through the burning city, observing all the destruction around him. In the middle of the street, he finds a wounded man lying among corpses. Stepping carefully over the bloody ground, he approaches the scene. He gets closer to the survivor and asks what happened there. Even wounded, the man recognizes him and calls his name in surprise. Worried, Ray asks what happened, and the man says they brought a golem. He then explains that the man with the monocle was the one controlling the creature. Lowering his head, he admits they were no match for the enemy. Telling Ray to run, the man finally collapses to the ground, his strength gone. Standing before the destruction, Ray just observes the fallen man in silence. With his face down, he stays silent, processing the whole situation. Covering his mouth, the wounded man demonstrates he has no strength left to continue. Drawing his dagger, Ray prepares to act after seeing all that. In the middle of the fire, he remains standing, surrounded by already defeated enemies. Concluding that the group will lose, he decides he needs to help Niles. Changing scenes to the bridge, the situation seems even more dangerous. All bloody, Pale tries to breathe while holding the body of another boy. Nearby, one of his friends is lying on the ground, already lifeless. Hugging the boy, Pale stays amidst several other fallen bodies. With a wounded face, he looks forward, completely paralyzed by fear. Before him, the golem prepares to launch another deadly attack. Without hesitation, the creature fires its attack directly at the boy. As he's hit, his only thought is a plea for Ray not to come back here. He reaches the central square. The street is utterly destroyed by fire. Bodies litter the ground. He realizes he's too late to help. He realizes they were all Niles's men. Despite the carnage, he doesn't see Niles's body. He has to believe he survived. Suddenly, a distant explosion demands his attention. He spins around, terrified. That direction. It's the children's tent. Without hesitation, he sprints desperately toward the blast. It hits him. The golem is heading right for them. He runs through the rain, splashing through the mud without slowing down. Though exhausted, he keeps running, pushing to get there as fast as possible. When he arrives, he finds the golem standing amidst more ruins. He sees the body of one of the children on the ground, right next to the creature. The terrible sight paralyzes him. He can't believe his eyes. But a moment later, he snaps. He leaps forward, charging the golem with everything he has. The golem fires a red beam, attacking the boy without hesitation. It hits him with a powerful blow, launching him backward. Thrown through the air, the impact makes him cough up blood. He slams into a wall, shattering the structure. Lying on the ground, surrounded by debris, he is badly injured and stunned. Coughing up more blood, he gasps that he needs to make sure everyone is safe. Just then, he hears a familiar voice calling to him from a distance. A memory flashes. He's walking away while the children wave to him. They used to run toward him, always so happy when he came home. Full of joy, the kids would ask him to hurry back soon. Even the little girl greeted him, asking if he was back already. Snapping out of the memory, he stares into the void with an expression of pure pain. Standing before him, Pale calls his name, looking down at the ground. With a sad look, he says he didn't want Ray to come back. Hearing that, his eyes widen. He's completely stunned by the words. Before him, he sees the bodies of Pale and the other children lying there. He murmurs the names of 2 little girls who are also dead. Then he calls out the names of 2 more boys who didn't survive the attack. Finally, he says Josephine's and Pale's names, all lifeless. Reaching out his hand, he refuses to believe they are all gone. Dragging himself forward, he says he still hadn't repaid them for what they did for him. Running toward the golem, he prepares to attack the creature. Seeing the golem's power, he recognizes the sounds from the earlier battle. Facing the monster, he realizes it was the golem that killed everyone. He concludes that everyone, the children and Niles's men, are dead. Through clenched teeth, he vows to avenge their deaths. But before he can act, the golem begins preparing another attack. Though wounded, he tries to move, but his body won't respond. Suddenly, a metal barrier appears, protecting him from the creature's attack. Surprised, he looks to the side, not understanding what just happened. Out of nowhere, a car appears and slams into the golem head-on, sending it flying. The impact throws the monster forcefully against a wall. Getting out of the car, Niles shouts desperately, asking if Ray is okay. He runs as fast as he can toward the fallen boy. Checking the wounds, he says that fortunately there are no broken bones. Hand on the ground, Ray only manages to say his name. Hearing the boy mention the children freezes Niles completely. He turns and faces the scene of destruction ahead. Clenching his fist tight, he shows all his pent-up anger. Apologizing, he says it's his fault for arriving late. Crying heavily, Ray asks why it would be his fault in this situation. Seeing the boy's suffering, Niles can only call his name. He walks over and hugs the boy tightly to comfort him. Grabbing his clothes, Ray leans on the man in that difficult moment. Ray asks about his men, and hears that they are all dead. With a hand on his head, Niles complains that Hector called in outside mages. Seeing the situation, Ray asks what he's going to do now. Saying he'll be right back, he says he'll look for survivors in the street. Suddenly, an attack hits him square in the chest, piercing straight through. Eyes wide, Ray watches the scene, unable to react. Before them, the golem turns, still ready to continue its attack. Preparing a new attack, the creature aims exactly at the two of them. Looking at the wound, Niles stares at Ray, unable to say a word. Because of the impact, blood splashes onto Ray's face. With a sad smile, he just laments the situation they got themselves into. Then he loses strength and falls forward, straight into Ray's arms. Collapsing lifelessly, he falls into the arms of the completely shocked boy. Holding his body, Ray notices his own hand is covered in blood. Staring at his hand, he wonders what just happened. Amidst the chaos, a solitary heart beats slowly. Flashbacks of their time together flood his mind. The training sessions, the meals. In his memory, Niles smiles one last time and calls his name. Suddenly, his heart begins to pound with overwhelming intensity. Holding Niles' body, he stares down the golem approaching slowly. Seeing its chance, the creature raises its hand for the final attack. With eyes filled with pure hatred, he vows to kill them all. Lying on the wet ground, Ray stares up at the golem standing directly before him. Clutching Niles' body, Ray calls his name, but gets no response. Hugging Niles close, he desperately wishes this was all just a dream he could wake up from. Still on the ground holding the body, Ray lifts his head and stares straight at his opponent. Seeing the boy's reaction, the golem extends its hand to end the confrontation once and for all. In response, Ray raises his own bloodied hand, readying a counterattack. The two charge their attacks, facing off in the middle of the alley. With an open palm, the golem forms an attack to fire at the young boy. Mirroring the move, Ray creates an attack in his own hand for defense. Immediately, the two energy blasts speed toward each other. Colliding in the center, the attacks create a powerful stalemate. A voice then declares that he is different, as a small core floats in the air. The core is reflected in his eye, as the voice states he is a human with emotions. Suddenly, Ray's attack begins to push back the golems, slowly advancing against it. Pushing with everything he has, his attack engulfs his rivals to finally end the fight. Taking a direct hit, the golem's body is completely shattered by the boy's assault. Hand still extended, Ray observes the aftermath of his devastating attack. Leaving a trail of destruction, his blow finally defeats the opponent in the alley. Rushing back to Niles, Ray holds him and desperately begs him to wake up. When Niles doesn't respond, Ray shouts that he can't die here. Opening his eyes weakly, Niles asks him to stop shaking him because it hurts too much. He remarks that he knew he wouldn't die in peace, but he didn't expect it to happen today. Lying there, he adds that he has no regrets and that he managed to make it pretty far. In a flashback, he wonders if things would have been different if he had fought sooner. Back in the present, he says that was back when he was around Ray's age. Ray tries to get up to find medicine, but Niles grabs his hand. With a faint smile, Niles tells the boy to leave this place and save himself. Using his last bit of strength, he insists that Ray go somewhere much better. He reveals that he always thought of Ray as his younger brother. In his final farewell, he tells Ray to swim against the current and never give in. Smiling one last time, he tells Ray that he'll be able to overcome anything. Immediately after, his hand relaxes and his lighter drops, signaling the end. Holding Niles' lifeless body, Ray stands there frozen in complete silence. With that final smile remaining on his face, Niles is now at complete and eternal rest. Lifting his head, Ray finally faces the crushing reality of his loss. He lowers his head and covers his face, unable to hold back the flowing tears. Then, he throws his head back and lets out a scream of pure anger and despair. Sometime later, he is still sitting alone in the same spot, completely motionless. With a vacant stare, he remains there, unwilling to move or show any reaction. Suddenly, he doubles over, clutching his body as if in physical pain. Looking at his own hand, he comments that it all feels like one very long dream. Remembering yesterday, the scene of everyone's death floods back into his mind. The memory of the attack sends his emotions into chaos once again. Clenching his fists, he realizes that something inside him has completely changed. Opening his palm, a flame appears, revealing his new power. Holding the flame, he now understands the origin of this newfound ability. Suddenly, the flame extinguishes, and he feels the exhaustion from the massive effort. Bringing a hand to his head, he realizes he might have overdone it a little. Recovering his posture, he faces the future with a look of utter determination. Now standing, he decides that it's finally time to move forward. Leaving the alley behind, he walks off in search of his revenge. Hood up, he goes on his way, no longer caring about the consequences. In the central plaza of 17th Street, a guard yells at people to hurry up and move along. Meanwhile, two men chat, agreeing that life is going to get worse under the Hector group. Hidden behind a barrel, Ray observes two members of the group talking nearby. One of the men comments that Niles shouldn't have disobeyed orders. Having found his targets, Ray grips his dagger firmly, preparing to attack. Just as he is about to advance, a hand grabs him, and a man tells him to wait. Without hesitating for a second, Ray spins around with a quick movement to escape. Immediately following up, he advances and strikes the man squarely with the dagger. Feeling the deep cut, the man lets out a cry of pain, completely taken by surprise. Seeing the attack, his partner crouches down and shouts for the boy to stay calm. Holding the dagger, Ray reveals the name of his next target, Humphrey. Declaring that the entire Hector group needs to die, he advances on the guard. With quick movements, the man manages to block the boy's sequence of strikes. Surprised, wondering what kind of insane moves the kid is using, he realizes that the boy wasn't nearly this strong before. Grasping the situation, he concludes he'll eventually lose if things continue this way. In a calculated move, he allows Ray to hit him to create an opening. Stunned by the action, Ray wonders why he left his shoulder wide open. Seizing the moment, the man grabs Ray's arm with full force. With a single movement, he violently slams the boy's body to the ground. Immobilizing him, he asks if Ray is willing to die for something as trivial as revenge. He then calls him by name, Ray, the ghost of 17th Street. Looking him right in the eyes, the man says he has an offer to make him. Standing now, he reveals he's been watching Ray for a long time and asks for his attention. With his hood covering part of his face, Ray just listens to the proposal in silence. It is explained that the man is Humphrey the Silent, known for always completing his tasks. Ray observes Humphrey's expression. He seems truly desperate about the situation. Wanting to understand his point, Ray asks directly what he wants with all this. Humphrey then makes his request. He wants Ray to leave Sector 50. Ray questions why. Revealing his motive, he asks for help finding his brother, whom Hector sold. He explains that Hector promised his brother's location after 10 years of service. Confused, Ray asks why he should accept a request coming from him. At that, Humphrey reveals he knows Ray can use magic, surprising the boy. Confirming the suspicion, he says he became certain after the fight at the warehouse. Finally, he warns that Ray won't be able to beat Hector with so little magic. He warns that Hector always keeps a terrible mage by his side for protection. With a serious expression, Humphrey says that this mage is a real demon. He explains that the mage freezes anyone who annoys him and drowns people with magic. Continuing the description, he states the mage is incredibly strong and very cruel. Humphrey advises him to get out of there so he can survive and get revenge later. Arms crossed, Ray listens to everything, concluding that Humphrey is absolutely right. He then reveals that the city of mages is somewhere upriver. Handing over a bag, he says it's all the money he's saved in his life. Ray asks why he's giving him the money, pointing out he might not fulfill the promise. With confidence, Humphrey replies that he knows him, and knows he doesn't break promises. Reminding him of Niles, he says that Ray can reach a much higher level. Hearing the encouraging words, Ray remains silent for a brief moment. Then, Humphrey warns that others are arriving, but Ray imposes a single condition. He asks Humphrey to take care of all the bodies left at the old hideout. With a smile, Humphrey agrees to the condition and says he will handle everything. Asking him to wait, he turns and starts walking away without looking back. Running down the street, he promises that one day he will return to that place. Now far away, he stops for a moment, trying to catch his breath. After looking back, he confirms that no one is following him through the streets. Walking down an alley, he spots an old lady sitting alone on a bench. Leaving a coin, he asks Grandma Viola to answer his question very quickly. Recognizing the boy, she asks with a smile what he would like to know. Then, he asks if the story she used to tell about the rainbow is true. He continues, wanting to know if finding a rainbow really allows one to make a wish. In a flashback, Pale tells Ray that he saw a rainbow in the sky. Pale describes the rainbow as a long, colorful band that appears after rain. He adds that finding where the rainbow touches the ground lets you make a wish. Not understanding, Ray starts talking about donuts, making Pale very irritated with him. Irritated, Pale calls him an idiot, and Ray says he'll handle the matter tomorrow. Back in the present, he stands in silence, lost in his old memories. She then confirms that rainbows exist, regardless of whether a wish can be made. Analyzing the old lady carefully, he tries to figure out if she is telling the truth. Unable to tell if she's lying, He concludes the story has some foundation. Recalling his previous conversation, he remembers Humphrey mentioning a mage who had once searched for a rainbow. Clenching his fist, he realizes the mage's story confirms their existence. Looking directly at the old lady, he asks if he could revive the dead with it. With a mysterious smile, she just replies, "Who knows what is possible?" She then says with enthusiasm that any wish could become reality with it. Lowering his face, he seems to process the information he just received from her. However, she warns that no one knows where they are, and they should stay away. Accepting the answer, he just thanks the old lady for her help and the information. Advising that she move away too, he turns his back and starts running. Arriving at the outskirts of Sector 50, the scene shifts to 23rd Street. Sitting near some barrels, he checks the paper Niles gave him earlier. Looking at the note, he sees a map showing an abandoned blue building nearby. Arriving at the location on the map, he finally finds the car that was left there. In a memory, Niles had said he would prepare at least one car for the escape. As he runs his hand over the car, a voice appears out of nowhere and asks who he is. From top of a building, a man questions if he was the one who received the orders. With a strange smile on his face, the man asks where Niles is now. Decided not to waste any more time, he gets ready to leave quickly. Grabbing the handle, he opens the car door to get in and flee. Advancing, the man screams and tries to prevent the boy from escaping the location. Inside the car now, he takes the wheel, ready to accelerate and leave. Grabbing the door, the man tries to stop Ray from driving off. Hanging onto the door, the attacker tries to force his way into the moving vehicle. Screaming desperately, he orders Ray to open the car door immediately. While fighting, he realizes his reinforcement magic is almost running out. Seeing he needs to act, he concentrates his fire magic directly into his hand. With the power gathered, he prepares the final attack to get rid of the man. Firing a fire attack, he hits the man squarely, defeating him. With the man falling to the ground, Ray finally manages to close the car door. Holding the wheel firmly, he slams on the accelerator to get out of there. Speeding up fully, he leaves the man behind, driving at high speed. With eyes focused on the road, he is finally heading out of Sector 50. He drives along a deserted road, continuing his long journey far away. Amidst the wreckage, a solitary raven watches the scene of utter destruction. Moments later, the bird takes flight, soaring over the ruins of the old city. Ray stops the car and gets out to check the trunk. He lifts the lid and looks inside at what was left for him. It's full of water bottles. Niles really was prepared for anything. Scanning the horizon, he realizes it will take days to reach the next sector. Night falls. He sets up camp, thinking about how he needs to learn more about magic now. Sitting by the fire, he reflects on what he already knows. Eyes closed, he recalls that there are two different types of mana. He knows one is red mana, the other requires a combination. While trying to control his power, he realizes emotions make using mana easier. Remembering Niles' death, he uses the anger from that moment to strengthen himself. Focusing on that feeling, he gathers a large amount of power in his body. Recognizing his limit, he understands that the mana vanishes if he breaks concentration. Determined to train, he starts testing possible mana combinations. Clasping his hands, he tries to mix and combine the different energies he possesses. After a moment, a new type of power begins to form in his hands, but the result isn't what he expected, leaving him frustrated with the attempt. He remembers the rules. Combining different powers requires immense mental effort. Still, he remains focused, determined to find combinations that work together. He grasps the situation. This wasn't necessary before, but things have changed. With a new goal in mind, he prepares for what lies ahead. After all, he finally has a reason to become much stronger than before. Continuing his journey the next day, he keeps driving down the deserted road. Stopping for a moment, he watches a rainbow form in the distant sky. At night, he continues training, practicing control over his mana. He manipulates the power, creating and destroying shapes, testing the limits of his ability. Feeling the fatigue, he decides it's best to stop training for now. Lying in the car, he thinks about how to use his mana more efficiently. Remembering the mage's energy, he wonders how to create a similar structure. He makes a decision. He'll find a way to achieve it once he reaches Sector 49. The scene shifts back to 17th Street. Hector's men are searching for something. Inside a car, the mage asks a guard if they still haven't found anything. Fearful, the guard says they'll find the golem soon, but the mage cuts him off. The mage points the tip of his cane at the guard, staring silently. Desperate, the man apologizes and begs for a little more time to search. With a cold gaze, he says he dislikes people who don't understand him. Unable to move, the guard just watches the cane advancing closer and closer. Then the mage forces the guard's hand to touch the tip of the metallic object. The moment they touch, energy releases, making the man start screaming. Screaming in pain, his arm and entire body begin to freeze rapidly. In seconds, the man's body transforms into an ice statue right there. With a slight movement, the mage taps the statue with his cane. Upon impact, the frozen body just crashes to the ground. He calls the guard useless, but is interrupted by a shout from the alley. Arriving at the scene, a man points out traces of a struggle and a piece of the golem. With a neutral expression, the mage simply analyzes the scene of the great battle. Sensing mana in the air, he realizes very strong magic was used here. Following the trail, he announces that he senses a concentration of mana nearby. He points at one of the men and calls him closer. The man responds nervously. He asks if anyone lived there, receiving confirmation about the children. Questioning about the orphans, he hears they probably fled because of the war. Holding his cane, he wonders if an orphan could have really used magic. Suddenly, a smile forms on his face, breaking his previous serious expression. He starts laughing loudly, leaving the guard completely confused by his reaction. He then questions how a street orphan could discover magic combinations alone, stating that it's impossible. He orders the guard to find out what happened. While the guard obeys, the mage stands still, seeming to have another train of thought. Then, he begins to consider the slight chance that the impossible happened there. He concludes they would have to be a genius, an archmage the likes of which the world has never seen. The scenery changes. Ray finally arrives at his destination, the devastated Sector 49. Remembering the past, Ray is with Niles, talking about his place of birth. Having a drink, Niles comments that Sector 42 is also a mess. He continues, saying the buildings there are bigger and there are more streets. According to Niles, the further you go upstream, the more drastically the scenery changes. Back in the present, Ray faces the enormous destroyed Sector 49 for the first time. Looking around, he observes the details of this place that is totally new to him. As he walks, he finds it strange to see some kids messing with a backpack there. He then realizes there are no golems, questioning if they only exist in Sector 50. Walking down the street, he listens to people's conversations about work in the mines. Seeing the sign for 36th Street, he realizes he needs to walk faster now. He needs information on magic to get the revenge he craves. Besides, he has to research mages, but he's going to need money. Remembering what Humphrey gave him, he worries about the duration of the journey. With a focused look, he seems to have an idea to solve his financial problem. Standing in front of Veronica Bookstore, he finally finds what he was looking for. Looking at the sign, he reads the name of the establishment right in front of him. He realizes that Veronica just seems like some random person's name. Not understanding the place, he wonders what exactly a bookstore is. In a memory, Niles used to teach him the meaning of various important words. Drawing on the ground, he showed him a circle and said that it meant brother. Forcing Ray to repeat it, he patiently taught him to read all the words. Back to the present, he looks through the window and sees something totally new. Looking inside, he observes several shelves full of objects with letters on them. Suddenly, a very loud scream scares him, making him turn to the side. Pointing from the window, a girl screams that he was the one who broke the glass. Continuing to scream, she demands to know why he is doing that to them. Confused by the accusation, he understands that those objects are called books. Out of patience, she tells him to leave at once, screaming very loudly. Then she screams, asking if he can't hear her, totally beside herself. Finally, she warns that the adults are coming down, and he's left confused. Not understanding the reaction, he just calls the girl a weirdo and ignores her. Indignant at what she heard, she is completely speechless for a brief moment. Then, she screams angrily, demanding to know what he just said about her. Realizing now isn't the time for this, he turns and starts to walk away. Walking through the streets, he continues his search for information about magic and mages. With his hood covering his face, he watches the movement of the people around him. Hiding in a corner, 3 guys watch him with looks of pure distrust. One of them alerts another, keeping a cautious eye on the unknown boy. He understands the looks. After all, he's a stranger walking through their territory. With a serious expression, he concludes that it's no different here than in Sector 50. Later, he is back at his car, parked in a deserted spot. Lying on the back seat, he laments not finding anything about magic. Closing his eyes, he decides he'll need to look in more areas the next day. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise coming from outside the car. Looking through the window, he spots the same 3 guys approaching his car. Already expecting them, he watches the group approach with total tranquility. Hiding behind the rocks, 4 guys surround the car, preparing to attack. Crouched near the car, they prepare to surprise whoever is inside. At that, the leader orders them to take him down, get the keys, and the food. From inside the car, Ray grabs an object to defend himself. With a golf club, Ray lands a precise blow on the guy's head. With the impact, the group leader falls to the ground, leaving his friends surprised. Getting out of the car in an instant, he faces the other 2 remaining guys. Seeing the scene, the hooded guy stands paralyzed, not knowing how to react, and Ray attacks the hooded boy. Maintaining his posture, he just stares at the guy who was easily neutralized by him. Without strength, the second attacker also falls to the ground, completely defeated by the boy. Yelling, the last guy advances with a pipe, trying to hit his head. Holding the pipe with his hand, he stops the last attacker's final strike. With the guy on the ground, he screams for the boy not to come any closer to him. Telling the guy to clench his teeth, he prepares to deliver the final blow. Paralyzed on the ground, the attacker stares at the boy, unable to move or react. After neutralizing the last of them, he gathers all the guys in one place. Kneeling in front of him, the three attackers now wait for his next order. Leaning against the car, he asks how many streets their group controls in that region. Demanding an answer, he faces the group with a serious expression, waiting for them to respond. Ray crosses his arms. He asks the boys how many streets they've taken over. The kid in the cap just stays silent. Suddenly, Ray clocks him across the face. The kid doesn't even have time to react. Desperate, he screams that there are 3 in total. Ray demands to know which ones. Ray keeps staring, waiting for the answer. Shaking, the kid replies that it's streets 23 through 25. Calling it a lie, Ray stomps hard on the kid's hand. Terrified by the scene, one of the other boys starts begging for mercy. Ray turns to the next boy holding a bag in his hand. He focuses his attention on him, staring him down. Panicked, the kid yells that he'll spill everything he knows about the group. He reveals their leader is named Kedrick, and their base is an old factory. Ray orders the talking boy to lift his head. He asks for his name. The boy replies that he's Nishu. Nishu reveals their orders were to take Ray out and steal his food. He adds that their leader is watching everything right now. Suddenly, a man screams for Ray to die and charges with a dagger. Ray realizes he really is being watched. With a powerful blast of wind, he throws the attacker back. Taken by surprise, the man complains about dust in his eyes. Before he can recover, Ray hits him with a barrage of strikes. Unable to react, the man is hurled away and falls to the ground, knocked out cold. Ray approaches the fallen man to send a message to the leader. He grabs him by the hair, forcing his head up slightly. Staring intensely into his eyes, Ray warns him that he isn't the only one watching. The scene shifts to a city with very different architecture. Walking down the street, Ray reflects that the people here don't know about magic. Distracted by his thoughts, he's stopped by someone calling out to him. A group of men approaches, asking if he can come with them. Hood up, Ray tells them to relax. He's not there to fight. Ray asks if they are the guys looking for him. One confirms it. He says their boss really liked the way Ray fights. Smiling, he hands Ray a piece of paper. Ray asks if they can read. He discovers none of them understand the note. He takes the paper and says he'll read it himself. Confirming he can read a little, he begins to analyze the message. Confused, they wonder how Ray knows how to read, since it's rare. Reading the note, Ray sees an invitation to work with their group. He looks up and asks how they choose their leader. Not quite understanding, the guy replies that the strongest becomes the boss. Decided, Ray tells them to move and starts walking ahead of the group. He turns back and announces he's going to meet their leader right now. Arriving at an abandoned factory, the group stops in front of Kedrick's base. Pointing to the building, the boy confirms this is the spot. He opens the doors, showing Ray the way into their hideout. Inside, they walk through the massive abandoned warehouse. Following the guide, Ray heads deeper into the hideout. Inside, he finds all the group members lined up, awaiting his arrival. Sitting in an armchair, the group leader finally speaks to Ray. Hood still up, Ray stares back without saying a word. Standing up, the man walks toward him and introduces himself as Kedrick. Directly, Ray also gives his name. Suddenly, Ray's eyes widen. He notices a specific detail on the leader's hand. He spots a peculiar ring on Kedrick's finger that catches his attention. Kedrick invites Ray to sit, saying he is a guest. Without hesitation, Ray goes to the chair and settles in across from him. All around, the gang members watch the scene intently. Sitting there, Ray analyzes the group's behavior and the leader's posture. Kedrick praises Ray's courage and asks where he came from. With a short answer, Ray reveals he came from Sector 50. Surprised by the answer, the gang members start whispering among themselves. They comment that they've never heard of anyone coming from such a distant place. With a quick gesture, Kedrick orders all his men to be silent. He then says Ray is more than qualified to join the organization. Confused, Ray asks what organization that would be. Explaining his plan, Kedrick says they want to join a real organization. He reveals the name Merc Red from the famous Sector 45. Kedrick tells him about the deal to join once they have 66 members. Inviting him, he says it's a great opportunity for Ray to improve his life. After hearing the proposal, Ray just comments that it's an interesting story. Stepping closer, he says, joining a group isn't difficult, but he has one condition. Ray declares he refuses to work for anyone weaker than him. After Ray speaks, the atmosphere in the room turns heavy and dead silent. With a serious face, Kedrick can barely believe what he just heard. Shocked, He asks if Ray just said that he is weaker. Repeating the question, Kedrick demanded to know if Ray had really just called him weak. Ray explained that back in Sector 50, leaders were chosen based on strength. Staring him down, he added that it wasn't about how well they could talk. Pissed off by his audacity, one of the gang members started shouting. Suddenly, the man was grabbed by the face, cutting him off mid-sentence. Holding his own subordinate, Kedrick asked who gave him permission to speak. He warned that he hated being interrupted as the man struggled to apologize. Lifting the guy into the air, Kedrick showed off an ability in his right arm. Watching the scene, Ray realized Kedrick wasn't using magic directly. Focusing on the object, he understood it was the ring emitting the mana. Meanwhile, one of the kids asked when all this mess was going to end. Analyzing the situation, Ray believed he could break that ring easily. In a close-up, the ring on Kedrick's hand continued releasing energy. After dropping the man to the floor, he looked down at him, completely defeated. With a smile on his face, Kedrick apologized, saying he got a little carried away. Asking if Ray still thought he was weaker, Kedrick proposed they put it to the test. With a short, direct answer, Ray simply confirmed that he did. Getting up from his chair, he stated with certainty that Kedrick was weaker, right while dodging a chair thrown at him. Completely furious at the nerve, Kedrick demanded he repeat what he just said. Yelling at his men, he asked if they also thought Ray was stronger. At that moment, Ray realized the ring reacted to the leader's emotions. It was clear to him that Kedrick didn't even know what the ring actually did. After calming down, Kedrick asked if Ray really wanted to see his strength. Issuing a challenge, he proposed a fight for leadership of the group. Kedrick accepted and scheduled the fight to happen in 1 week. He warned they would fight when everyone, including other gangs, was watching. Saying that's how they'd know who the strongest really was, he ended the discussion. Ray took the opportunity to ask where he got such a powerful ring. Smiling, Kedrick said he'd find out if he managed to beat him first. He finished the conversation, guaranteeing that would never happen. The very next day, the scene showed the rooftops of that same city. Walking through the streets, Ray was still questioning himself about the ring he saw earlier. Suddenly, something was thrown in his direction from behind. With incredible reflexes, he managed to catch the object before it hit him. Surprised, a group of men asked who gave him permission to walk around there. Then another group appeared, and their leader called him crazy. Surrounding Ray, they warned that they ran those streets, and for him not to think about escaping. Telling them to shut up, he interrupted one of the men's threats. With a defiant gesture, Ray challenged all of them to a fight right there. After the fight, Ray reflected that news of his battle was spreading. He realized Kedrick's gang wasn't attacking him, following orders, but he noticed the other gangs were uniting to try and stop him. Despite the injuries, he concluded everything was going exactly according to plan. He knew his magic got stronger the more he got used to it. His hand was bleeding, but he concluded that provoking fights was the right choice. Changing the subject mentally, he noticed someone watching him from afar. Looking down the street, he asked how long the person was going to keep watching. Silently, a boy just adjusted his cap without fully revealing himself. Taking a step forward, he described Ray's hair and face. Then he finally asked if Ray was the person known as the Hunter. Without getting an answer, the boy kept staring at him, waiting for a reaction. With a serious look, Ray kept watching the boy in front of him. He then told the boy to take off his glasses so he wouldn't hurt his hands. Scared, the boy gestured wildly and yelled that he wasn't there to fight. Not understanding the reaction, Ray stood still, observing the panicked boy. He tried to calm Ray down, saying he wasn't a real fighter. Then Ray asked what the real reason for him being there was. Before answering, the boy adjusted the strap of the bag on his shoulder. Turning again, he introduced himself, saying his name was Philip. With his hand extended, he revealed he had an offer to make. Leading Ray through a junkyard, Philip explained that his workspace was nearby. He mentioned hearing rumors about the Hunter all over town. Ray realized he'd earned that nickname just by being an outsider who beat everyone up. Continuing down the path, they walked side by side toward their destination. Stopping in front of a building, Philip announced they had arrived. Smiling, he opened the door to let them inside. Inside, various people were busy with tasks like shining shoes and handling deliveries. Impressed by the sight, Ray commented on how huge the place actually was. Welcoming him, Philip introduced himself as the owner of Hotel Philip. Ray estimated over 100 people, but was told the real number was 186. Taking a closer look, he noticed everyone there seemed to share a common trait. He concluded they were all young or small, and Philip confirmed his observation. Philip then explained that Sector 49 was full of mines where adults frequently died. Because of that, he said, even children were hired for the work. He revealed he paid bribes and dispatched workers to maintain his monopoly. Explaining his role, he said he was a broker who also provided shelter. Ray asked if he built all this alone, but they were interrupted. Running toward them, Jonathan reported that work at the restaurant was going well. He handed over payment, saying it was the month's rent. Philip thanked him and watched him leave, pen already in hand. He quickly made notes in his notebook to update everyone's information. Turning to Ray, he apologized, explaining he needed to write everything down. Offering the notebook, he asked if Ray wanted to take a look. Ray took the notebook and started flipping through the pages carefully. There, he found detailed notes about himself, the so-called hunter. Shocked, Philip asked if he could read. Ray confirmed he could, a little. Panicked, the boy started desperately apologizing to Ray. He tried to explain himself, saying he liked observing the people around him. Handing the notebook back, Ray told him there was no need to apologize for that. Philip just nodded silently, clutching his notebook back in his hands. Arriving at a room, Philip announced they had finally reached their destination. Surprised by his presence, the two men inside stared at him blankly. Questioning the boy's presence, one of them warned that not just anyone could enter. Smiling, Philip explained that this was the hunter, and he was a guest. Inviting him in, he told Ray to make himself comfortable and grab a seat. While rummaging through a cabinet, he confessed he originally thought Ray was a con artist. Showing off a bag of money, he guaranteed he wasn't lying and that credit was everything. Sitting on the table, he explained that money could be recovered, credit could not. After hearing the explanation, Ray asked about the proposal he had mentioned. Clasping his hands together, Philip prepared to finally make his big pitch. With a determined look, he readied himself to present his idea. Extending his hand, he invited Ray to become his partner. He detailed that the partnership would begin after Ray beat Kedrick. Inside the room, the two continued discussing the business proposal. Silently, Ray just stared at Philip, processing the offer he just received. Noticing a shift, Ray wondered where Philip's sudden courage came from. Ray asked if he hadn't considered the possibility of defeat in the upcoming fight. With a serious look, Ray wanted to know the reason for such confidence in him. Philip responded simply, saying it was just a hunch he had. He then explained that he liked observing people to understand them better. Pointing out a detail, he mentioned that Ray looked at people's chests when talking. This made him wonder if Ray had some kind of trauma regarding faces. Returning to the subject, Philip bragged, and Ray asked for more examples. Insisting on the topic, Ray asked him to recount the other habits he had noticed. He revealed that Ray always turned corners leading with his right foot to prepare himself. Surprised by the analysis, Ray realized it was the first time hearing this about himself. Then he remembered how people always found him strange and scary. It became clear that everyone always viewed him as cold or intimidating. He reflected that he needed to focus just to feel emotions beyond anger. In this, he felt that Philip might be a clue to his emotional growth. Philip said that Kedrick let himself be carried away by emotions, unlike Ray. Interrupting the explanation, Ray raised his head and accepted the partnership proposal. Surprised, Philip questioned him, but Ray told him to handle the details. Smiling, Philip guaranteed he would take care of everything. No problem. As he was leaving, Ray announced he had one condition to close the deal. He turned to Philip, realizing the boy had many connections. With a serious look, Ray asked him to find something very important. 2 days later, Ray is at the junkyard, waiting for his car to be fixed. While working on the car, a mechanic asks if he came from Sector 50. He notes that the car's state suggests a long journey through the desert. Ray just watches him in silence, processing the information. Working under the car, the mechanic asks for a wrench and some nuts. Ray stares at the tools lying in the box beside him. With a simple gesture, he uses his ability to move the objects. Levitating the tools, he moves them toward the mechanic lying down. The mechanic startles, seeing tools suddenly appear right next to him. Sitting on a pile, Ray merely observes the man's confused reaction. The scene shifts. The sun begins to set over the city. Announcing he's finished, the mechanic says the engine won't overheat anymore. Whispering, he reveals he secretly used the best part in the shop. He explains it was a direct request from Philip, their savior. Hearing about Philip's fame, Ray thinks about his new partner. Before leaving, the mechanic warns that Philip asked him to deliver a note. He explains he took the paper because he couldn't memorize the whole message. Saying goodbye, he runs off, leaving Ray alone with the note. Ray opens the paper and begins to read the information he received. In a flashback, he remembers the request he made to Philip. He remembers Philip guaranteeing he would find the information Ray needed. With a confident smile, Philip asks if Ray knows who he is. Back in the present, Ray is surprised by the amount of information obtained. Reading the report, he analyzes data on several suspects in the city. Continuing to read, he gets intrigued by one of the names on the list. His eyes widen, realizing one of them is worth investigating. Heading out onto the street, he decides to confirm the information personally. On the way, he observes a man in a uniform carrying boxes of food. He follows him for a while, carefully analyzing his movements and appearance. After observing, he notes that Lennon isn't the target, as a detail is missing. Crossing off another name, Ray concludes only one person remains on the list. The note describes an accident with a pipe falling toward the suspect. Spinning in the air, the pipe changes trajectory as if deflected. Then the man walks away from the impact site, unharmed by what happened. According to the report, he showed no surprise at the danger he faced. This leads to the conclusion that there's a high chance he is a mage. The scene changes. Ray observes something strange happening in a nearby alley. Nearby, two boys celebrate seeing that a store is closed again. Questioning the owner's resistance, one wonders about the daily stonings, but the other shouts they can't stop, as they'll receive double the money. Holding a stone, he reveals the plan is to force them to move. He prepares to throw the stone at the second-floor window. Suddenly, a woman appears in the window and shouts for them to leave. Shouting from the window, she says she heard the two boys' entire conversation. Ray then perceives that despite her courage, her mana shows great fear. One of the boys shouts that he can see her fear even from a distance. Hand on the window, she starts yelling for them to shut up. Before she can finish, a stone hits the wall right next to her. The boy mocks her, saying everyone knows only children and an old man live there. In despair, she screams again for them to leave her alone. Observing the scene, Ray decides it's time to intervene. The boy warns that this time he's going to aim for the girl's face. From afar, Ray prepares to use one of his abilities. His eye focuses on the stone's trajectory, ready to act at any moment. Using his hands, he prepares to create a protective barrier. Before hitting the window, the stone is stopped by an invisible force. Confused by the scene, one of the boys wonders what just happened. At the window, the girl just stares at the scene, scared and unresponsive. She keeps looking straight ahead, trying to understand how the stone stopped in midair. Surprised by the scene, Ray realizes the girl is also a mage. Confused, the two men wonder what just happened there. Saying they must have imagined it, one suggests trying again. Ray realizes that was clearly the use of magic. At the window, the girl screams desperately, ordering them to leave. Shouting that she's pretending to be tough, they prepare the stones. Then, the stones are thrown toward her window. Unable to defend herself, she just squeezes her eyes shut. Suddenly, Ray's hand appears in front of her to protect her. He uses his ability, casting a spell with his hand. A strong gust of wind suddenly stops the stones in the air. Getting hit in the face, one of the attackers falls straight to the ground. Then the last attacker turns, looking back completely terrified, and another stone hits him in the face. With the attacker on the ground, Ray walks slowly toward him. After resolving the situation, he simply walks away from the alley. At the window, the girl is shocked to hear him say it's been a while. At the foot of the stairs, the two attackers remain fallen and unconscious. Bowing, she thanks him greatly for helping there. He says there's no need for that and he has something to ask. Then she asks up front if he is a mage, since he used magic. She gets very close to his face, looking with curiosity. Feeling awkward, she invites him in to talk better. Entering the place, he follows her inside the bookstore. Once inside, she introduces herself, saying her name is Veronica. He replies that his name is Ray, and she repeats his name. Veronica apologizes for yelling, thinking he was one of them. Thanking him again, she says she would be in trouble without him, but he says it's not necessary. He just wanted to see the bookstore. Hearing that, she gets quite surprised by his unexpected answer. Sitting at a table, Ray asks where she learned to use magic. Surprised, Ray asks if her grandfather can also use magic. Wanting to meet him, he asks to see him, and she agrees to let him know. Veronica notices he has a small cut on his cheek. He says it's just a scratch, but she warns him of the danger. Approaching him, she touches his face and asks for just a second. With her hand on the spot, she begins to use her healing magic. Her ability concentrates directly on the small wound. In a few moments, the cut on his skin disappears completely. She smiles and lets him know the procedure is done. Suddenly, he stands up and asks how she managed to do that. Holding her shoulders, he says she just moved white mana. In a quick flashback, it's explained that he never managed to use that power. Showing several children, the scene reveals that mana reacts to sacrifice. Back in the present, Veronica says she only used healing magic. Ray asks what she means by white mana. In a flashback, Niles explains that not even mages can see mana. Veronica says she doesn't know what white mana is, asking about regeneration. Using a chart, she explains that healing magic uses the regeneration element. She reveals that, counting all types, there are over 100 magical elements. With the new information, he realizes he can learn more from her grandfather. He asks if her grandfather is on the second floor of the house. Asking him to wait, she says she'll check if her grandfather has woken up yet. Climbing the stairs, she says she'll be right back and leaves Ray waiting. While waiting, he starts looking at the book titles on the shelves. He remembers that books are considered very expensive items. Seeing his own hands, he decides not to touch the copies so as not to dirty them. He covers his nose, remembering the last time he took a bath. Getting confused, he doesn't understand how she stood being near him. Suddenly his eyes widen as he notices something on the table. There he finds some diaries stacked instead of regular books. Reading a title, he comes across a study on elemental distribution, and then he sees a book about the expansion of the Black Rain. Getting serious, Veronica heads back downstairs in the bookstore. Ray isn't there, which confuses her. She asks if he left, but he suddenly appears, saying he's still right there. Startled, she spins around and lets out a loud scream. Embarrassed, she quickly claims he was just browsing the shop. He asks about magic books, and she's stunned he can even read. Her surprise is obvious when she realizes he can actually read the titles. Ray asks about her grandfather, but she tells him he's asleep. She asks him to come back tomorrow, and he agrees to the plan. Just as he's about to leave, he pauses with his hand on the door to listen. She asks why he's so desperate to find her grandfather. Turning his face away, he stays silent for a moment before answering. Opening the door, he reveals he's looking for an item called the prism. The scene shifts to 4:30 in the afternoon. Inside a busy cafe, people are sitting and chatting at tables. Ray reads a note, analyzing information about his new target. He hopes to gain new insight regarding the use of magic. The note says the source is an informant named Joni. Just then, the waiter, whose name is Jonathan, arrives with his order. Checking his name tag, Ray confirms this is the informant, Johnny. Saying it's on the house, Joni calls him a hero. Full of excitement, he tells Ray to ask whatever he wants. Ray asks how accurate the schedule he received is. Johnny confirms he watched the man follow that routine for 3 solid months. Suddenly, someone yells at Joni to stop stalling and get back to work. Apologizing, he rushes off to attend to other tables. Checking his watch, Ray realizes he has about an hour left. He decides he'll have to wait for now. Fork in hand, he starts eating the dish he received. Sipping his drink, he just bides his time in the cafeteria. Suddenly his eyes widen as a familiar figure walks by. A mysterious man passes right in front of the shop where he was sitting. Sensing the magic, he's certain that man is a mage. Thanking Johnny for the food, Ray says goodbye and leaves the premises. Arriving at the target's house, he prepares to search for clues inside. He heads down the stairs leading to the basement entrance. Trying the door, he finds it locked, just as he expected. Unable to turn back now, he looks for a way to break in. Concentrating his ability, he extends his hand toward the lock mechanism. Using his magic, he directs it straight into the keyhole. With the power forcing its way in, the lock mechanism finally begins to yield. The door opens, and he steps into the dark room. Looking at his own hand, he questions how he even managed that. Deciding to focus, he begins investigating the room for clues. Over in the corner, he finds a trash can full of crumpled papers. Focused on the search, he digs out some of the crumpled notes from the bin. Smoothing one out, he starts reading what appears to be a letter. In it, the author writes about being able to get stronger using a bloodstone. Reading on, he sees the letter is addressed to 66 people. In a flash of memory, Kedrick speaks about a promise made to orphans. Letter in hand, he realizes the man was expelled from the organization. Suddenly, his gaze shifts as he notices something nearby in the room. He finds a small pot stashed away near the papers. Opening the object, he decides to carefully investigate what's inside. Inside are various gems, the same kind that were in Kedrick's ring. He then remembers the magic ring Kedrick wore the other night. Holding one of the gems, he senses it attracting the surrounding mana. He decides to test what happens when he uses his magic with the gem. Concentrating his power, he creates a large flame in the palm of his hand. He notes that he managed to create the magic much faster than usual. Hearing footsteps, Ray is startled. The man came back too soon. The mysterious man enters the basement, walking with firm strides. He complains about forgetting his wallet, cursing himself for being careless. Hidden, Ray hears him say that he'll soon be able to return to the organization. The man decides to buy more food and heads back up the stairs to leave again. As the man exits, Ray continues watching everything from his hiding spot, but suddenly, the man stops at the door, saying he needed one more thing. Turning with a sinister look, he reveals that he also needs poison. Without waiting, Ray tries to cut him, but misses, only grazing the man's face. The man loses his balance, slipping backward slightly. With a wounded face, he asks who the boy is, completely surprised. Charging in with his knife, Ray decides he will subdue the mage to get answers, but he stops abruptly, noticing something totally unexpected happening. Using his bare hand, the man grabs the sharp blade without getting cut. He then asks if Ray dares to point a knife at an adult. Squeezing the weapon, the man wonders how a mere boy can be this strong. Retreating from the attack, Ray manages to dodge a chain coming in his direction. Analyzing the situation, he realizes how the man did that just now. He understands his opponent used mana to prevent the blade from cutting his skin. Yelling that he was going easy before, the man prepares to fight seriously. Attacking with his weapon, he advances on Ray with fury. Seeing the magic in action, Ray wonders if he can do the same thing. Despite the intense assault, Ray manages to dodge his attacks. With his face bleeding, the man is shocked. Using the exact same magic, Ray surprises the man, who demands to know how he did it. The man keeps attacking. Ray maintains his focus, preparing for the next movement of the fight. The man manages to dodge Ray's strike. He then surprises Ray with an accurate attack right to the gut. Completely wounded, the man finally falls to his knees, out of strength to fight. He then says he was right, and that the boss sent him here. While the man babbles about copying magic, Ray stabs his hand. With the knife at his throat, Ray warns that he has many questions. Laughing, the man says he didn't expect such a young assassin. Seeing he won't get any answers, Ray prepares to finish him off. Yelling, the man promises he's going to burn the assassin to death. A huge pillar of fire erupts, completely engulfing his own body. Amidst the flames, he sends a direct message to his boss. He warns that Walter will pay him a visit, should Ray survive this. Advancing while covered in flames, he yells that his boss will regret everything. His mana spins intensely, spreading throughout his entire body. To protect himself, Ray creates a barrier with his own mana. The man accuses the assassin of having come for the bloodstone. With a shout, he challenges Ray to try and kill him now. Concentrating his power, Ray prepares to launch a magical counterattack. Firing his magic, he manages to block the enemy's advancing flames. The man mocks the protection, saying it's a power worthy of himself. After his attack fails, he asks how long Ray plans to keep defending. Maintaining the defense, Ray realizes it won't last much longer like this. Suddenly, he notices a much larger attack is coming now. Laughing, the enemy launches an enormous blast of fire in his direction. Seeing he can't block it, he decides he's going to put the fire out first. Surprised, the mage asks if he's gone crazy for dropping his protection. A small water bubble appears, leaving the opponent thoroughly confused. Then, several water bubbles begin extinguishing the fire around him. With a focused gaze, he uses two types of magic at the same time. Preparing his hand, he concentrates an attack using the water element. Shocked, the mage asks if he isn't the organization's true assassin after all. Immediately following, Ray launches a powerful wave of water against the enemy. With no chance to escape, the man is completely swallowed by the aquatic attack. With the floor entirely soaked, the intense battle finally comes to an end. Leaving the building, he walks down the street, still completely drenched. He's bleeding, feeling the after effects of using his magic to the maximum. As he walks, he reflects on the power of Walter and the other mage. Seeing the power of his enemies, he understands he cannot take revenge just yet, but he clenches his fist, determined to get stronger over time. Leaning against a wall, he laments how things ended up happening in the basement. Looking at the stones in his hand, he regrets not having grabbed them all. The next morning, we're back in front of Veronica's bookstore. Ray arrives and stops at the door. Veronica, holding a stack of books, greets him with a welcoming smile. She comments that his outfit has changed since yesterday. He simply replies that he got rid of the other suit. Keeping a poker face, he offers no further details. Leading him inside, Veronica says she already told her grandfather about him. Ray immediately asks if she mentioned anything beyond what they agreed upon. Suddenly, two children appear, peeking from behind a door. Realizing they've been spotted, the two boys hide quickly. Veronica explains they are her brothers, brought from the same orphanage. Ray asks if the grandfather adopted them to teach them magic. Saying there would be no other reason, he reminds her that's how she learned. Hearing the explanation, she agrees. Realizing his logical reasoning, stopping in front of a door, she announces that her grandfather is inside. Veronica introduces Ray, saying he's the one who helped them the other day. Sitting on the bed, the grandfather recognizes him, acknowledging that it is indeed him. The grandfather then asks Veronica to wait outside, leaving him alone with Ray. The door closes, leaving the two alone to talk privately. Ray sits in a chair, facing her grandfather on the bed. Starting the conversation, the grandfather says Ray has his deepest gratitude. He mentions he should have done it himself, but Ray replies it wasn't difficult. With a sharp gaze, Ray analyzes the man sitting in front of him. He notices the grandfather has 4 mana rings on his chest. The colors are shown, explained to represent complex and varied emotions. The explanation continues, revealing they are traces of ancient emotions. Even though Ray is hard to read, the grandfather says he heard about his questions. Ray confirms he was looking for a mage and asks his question. Claiming not to know much, the grandfather asks where young Ray came from. Seeing his silence, the grandfather suggests asking a different question. He then proposes a game where the winner gets to ask a question. With a quick reaction, Ray shows his sharp senses and surprises the grandfather. The grandfather asks if he can feel the mana between them. Ray answers yes, staring fixedly at the energy surrounding them. With his hand extended, he says he not only feels it, but also sees it. The grandfather explains that every magic uses a different element. With his hand on the grandfather's, Ray says the element is maintenance. He continues, stating that's why it's the hardest to maneuver. Suddenly, the grandfather's eyes widen upon hearing about the other element. Surprised, he asks how Ray can feel 2 elements instead of 1. Ray confirms, saying one is gray and the other is dark gray. Bursting into laughter, the grandfather is shocked by the revelation. Grabbing his hair, He says he searched for years for that talent. He laments finding true talent right now, at the end of his life. Calming down, he asks Ray to tell him what the other magical element is. Ray says it's no fun to just tell and challenges him to win the game. Explaining the rules, he talks about the mana sphere between them. Whoever pulls the magic sphere into their hand first wins the round. To be fair, he offers to start with the sphere closer to Ray. Accepting the challenge, Ray agrees and prepares to start the game. With a gesture, the grandfather signals for the match to begin. Ray concentrates and tries to pull the sphere with his magic. In an instant, the sphere flies into the grandfather's hand, who wins. Ray is completely shocked by his opponent's speed. Holding the sphere, the grandfather looks at him with a calm and serious expression. Being the winner, he announces he will ask the first question of the game. He asks who Ray learned magic from, receiving the answer that he learned it himself. Shocked, the grandfather says Ray has surprised him twice in the same day. Ray asks if a self-taught mage is rare, but he doesn't answer. Extending his hand, Ray says they should start the next match. Laughing at the situation, the grandfather seems to be enjoying the game immensely. Ray just watches, keeping his serious expression focused on the challenge. Winning again, the grandfather says he took this round too. He explains that the competition depends entirely on the ability to control mana. Clenching his fist, Ray realizes he won't get information this way. With a determined look, he decides he needs to use a different method. The grandfather then invites him to continue the game once more. Restarting the dispute, Ray tries to pull the mana sphere towards himself, but he uses a new tactic, creating an energy sphere in his other hand. Taken by surprise, the grandfather is pushed back by his new magic. Sphere in hand, Ray states there are no rules against interference. Seeing the strategy, the grandfather authorizes him to ask his question now. So he asks something fundamental, wanting to know what mana is. With a smile, the grandfather repeats the word mana, intrigued by the question. He explains that mana is the fundamental element that constitutes all things. He explains that very few humans are born with the ability to perceive mana. But he warns that just feeling mana doesn't mean being able to use magic. Ray asks if talent is the ability to manipulate mana. Confirming, he explains it's about separating and combining the elements of mana. He says magic is a way to explore oneself. He quotes a saying about mana finding those who are honest. With that phrase in his head, Ray seems to reflect on that important teaching. Starting the next game, he throws the mana sphere in the grandfather's direction. Seeing Ray's ability, he's surprised by the quick learning. Holding the sphere, Ray finally manages to win the round against him. Seeing that he won, the grandfather asks what his next question will be. With the doubt in his mind, he asks about the rings that mages have. He explains that the rings are like containers to hold accumulated mana. The mana from the air accumulates and is refined inside the rings. Asking about the process, Ray questions if this facilitates mana usage. He explains that constant use of air mana causes poisoning. Describing the symptoms, he cites laughter, crying, or even intense anger. Warning of the danger, he says this can turn into a permanent mental illness. In a flashback, Kedrick appears, connecting mana usage to uncontrolled emotions. The scene shows he was immune to the poison because he didn't feel emotions. With an idea, Ray starts talking about an interesting new possibility. He says someone immune to the poison would have a great advantage in battle, but the grandfather replies he's never seen anyone like that. They would be too powerful. The scene then shows the infinite amount of mana that exists in the air. Then the grandfather asks Ray if he has any dream for the future. He confirms there is something he wants to do, and the grandfather asks what it is. With a determined look, he reveals there is someone he wishes to kill, but he also says there are people he would very much like to be able to save. Surprised, the grandfather says he has heard the first part, but not the second. Then he looks at him and asks if Ray would like to learn magic from him. Surprised, Ray is left speechless upon hearing the mage's unexpected proposal. He wonders why a four-circle mage would teach him, but the grandfather surprises him, saying he wants absolutely nothing from him. After a brief silence, he thinks a little about the offer received. With determination, he finally accepts the invitation to be his student. Hearing the answer, the grandfather seems satisfied with the boy's decision. With everything settled, he calls Veronica back into the room. She enters, and he invites her to sit together with them there. He then asks if she remembers why he adopted her. Confirming that Ray was looking for the rainbow, he begins to explain. He relates that the legend of the rainbow is a very ancient story. According to the legend, whoever finds the rainbow will have immense power, because that person will become an entity similar to a god. He then explains that a god is a being who can do whatever they want. With the new information, Ray understands the reason the other mage is looking for the item. Then Veronica begins asking her grandfather about the rainbow legend. Suddenly, an enormous object smashes through the window towards everyone. Seeing the attack, She becomes paralyzed, unable to move from the spot, but Ray protects her, blocking the object with his own hand. Even with his hand bleeding, he keeps her safe behind him. Amid the shards, Veronica watches the scene, completely shocked by everything. Seeing the floating shards, she wonders if it's wind magic. Ray just watches the attackers flee, saying nothing about it. In a flashback, he remembers the warning he gave Kedrick's henchmen, but through the window he sees they haven't given up attacking the bookstore. Looking out the window, the grandfather thanks him for saving them again. He then asks Veronica to heal the wound on Ray's hand. She begins using her healing magic on his injured hand. While healing him, she says the procedure will finish soon. Crying, she says his skin might be scarred. In a memory, he thinks that scars can be useful to him. Reprimanding Veronica, the grandfather advises against using magic without a circle. He says the attacks have been happening for over a month now. With a hand on his head, he reveals that someone wants to buy the shop. Ray then asks if he has no intention of selling the bookstore. He says that was his intention, but the situation is becoming unbearable. In a flashback, he remembers opening that bookstore only half a year ago. His goal was to train disciples and finish his life's research. At the opening, the children congratulate him with a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Back in the present, he relates that she takes care of everything because of his illness. He fears that if he dies, things will only get worse for the children alone. So he decides to sell the place, but Veronica shouts that he can't. Standing up, she insists he absolutely cannot sell the shop. Grabbing his clothes, she reminds him that this was his childhood dream. But he explains that things don't always turn out as we wish. Head down, she repeats that she doesn't want to close the shop for anything. Crying desperately, she yells that she doesn't want to see him disappear forever. With tear-filled eyes, he calls her name, overcome with emotion. In that moment, he realizes he placed too great a burden on her. With a determined look, Ray makes an important decision right then and there. On another day, heavy rain falls over the city again. Lying in bed, the grandfather sleeps, suffering from the eternal sleep disease. Crying, Veronica explains he will sleep more and more until he doesn't wake up. She continues, saying he can only stay awake for a few hours. With a smile, she asks Ray to come back tomorrow to see him again. Already at the exit, she thanks him because his coat fit the grandfather. Then she says goodbye, wishing to see him again the next day. In a flashback, one of the boys cries, remembering what happened there. With a closed expression, Ray reflects on his inability to relate to pain. Telling her not to worry, he tries to comfort her with a few words. Hearing the consolation, she is surprised and unresponsive to the attitude. With a tear on her face, she is moved by the unexpected gesture. Thanking him in silence, she watches him as he turns to leave. Walking in the rain, he wonders where the shop's attackers went. In a flashback, he remembers the shop's street is Jeeper Gang territory. He realizes he'll have to modify his plan because of the black rain. Decided, he starts running to find his informant first. Running through the city, he decides he needs to look for Philip right now. With focused eyes, he continues his path to his hideout. Arriving there, he hears strange noises coming from inside a container. Hidden, he sees Kedrick's gang waiting outside. Observing the scene, he approaches to see what is happening there. Inside, Kedrick is beating someone with vicious rage. Then he realizes the person being attacked is his friend Philip. With Philip on the floor, Kedrick hatefully calls him an arrogant bastard. Holding his ring, Kedrick starts yelling, unleashing his fury against him. His scream echoes through the place, scaring the members of his gang. He stops suddenly, turning with a confused and suspicious expression. Seeing the chance, Ray storms the container and kicks one of the members. With all the henchmen on the floor, Ray finally calls for Kedrick. Turning back, Kedrick recognizes him and asks if it's really Ray. Then he asks with a smile if Ray also has business with him. Looking to the side, Ray sees Philip lying gravely injured on the floor. With a very battered face, he seems to be almost losing consciousness. With Philip on the ground, Kedrick asks what Ray wants with him there. Seeing that Philip passed out, Ray worries about his friend's condition. In his thoughts, he remembers that Philip helped him in many ways. Bringing his hand back, he says he always pays his debts. With hand extended, he makes it clear that this is his rule. With a smile, Kedrick states their duel is only tomorrow. With his ring glowing, he asks if Ray really wants to fight now. Ray just stares silently, not responding to his provocation. Then he notices Kedrick is different, with stronger mana. Approaching, he warns he didn't go there to fight him. Then he asks why Kedrick did all that to Philip. Mockingly, he says Philip came with a business proposal. With a sneer of contempt, he says that's all Philip does. Yelling, he says Philip only ever takes advantage of the strongest. Disgusted, he advances to attack Philip on the ground again with fury. With a battered face, Philip remains on the ground, nearly passed out. Grabbing his clothes, Ray stops him from continuing the attack on Philip. With a single movement, he throws Kedrick to the other side of the container. With a look full of fury, Kedrick recovers from the unexpected throw. Using his magic, he manages to land on his feet, sliding across the floor. Then he advances again, fist clenched and ready to attack, but Ray intercepts him, blocking Kedrick's punch with his hand. Creating a great impact, the two fists collide with much force. Standing still, they remain with fists locked against each other. Thereupon, Kedrick orders him to leave, saying it's none of his business. Holding his fist, Ray asks why he is doing that. Teeth clenched, Kedrick just repeats the question angrily. Without answering, he tries to land a direct punch to Ray's face. Yelling, he says he can't stand looking at weak people like Philip. Stepping back, Ray asks if he really hates weak people. Hand on his face, Kedrick says he despises and is disgusted by the weak. Fist clenched, Ray says that's no reason to hurt him. Then Kedrick punches the ground and orders him to get out of there now. He threatens him, saying he could end up just like Philip. With hate, he warns he'll show what happens in his territory. Ray just stares silently, showing no reaction to the threats. Jewel in hand, he thinks about using it to resolve the situation. Confused, Kedrick asks what he meant by another example. Arms crossed, Ray says there is a better method for making examples, but Kedrick tells him to stop stalling and get straight to the point. With a smile, Ray says he would do it in front of everyone. Kedrick falls silent, thinking about the suggestion he just heard. With Philip on the floor, he imagines the scene, agreeing with the idea. He then admits that isn't a bad idea, in fact. Ray suggests doing it on the day of the duel, since everyone will be watching. Looking at Philip, Kedrick asks what happens if he runs away. Hand on Philip's shoulder, Ray says he will be responsible. With a smile, Kedrick says Ray doesn't seem like the type to back out. Before leaving, he says he doesn't believe Ray would do that, but he threatens him, saying he'll have to take his place. As the door closes, they are left alone inside the dark container. Rushing to help, Ray goes to where Philip is lying in the corner. Kneeling, he asks if Philip is okay and if he can speak. Groaning in pain, Philip can barely move due to his injuries. With a serious expression, Ray realizes he's worse off than he imagined. Leaving there, he carries Philip to a safe place in the rain. Arriving at a building, he knocks on the door to ask for help there. The boy who opens it says they don't open up during the black rain. Eyes wide, he gets scared seeing Philip's condition. Shouting his friend's name, the boy panics at the scene. With Philip on his back, Ray asks for help with an exhausted expression. On a rainy night, the camera focuses on an isolated, silent building. Inside, Ray waits, sitting on a bench in the hospital hallway. He lifts his face, turning as he hears someone approaching. Jonathan arrives and announces that Philip has finally woken up and can receive visitors. In the room, Ray comments that Philip looks better. Philip thanks him for carrying him. Philip smiles, saying the important thing is that he's still alive. Sitting beside the bed, Ray asks why Kedrick was attacking him. Showing a flashback, Philip explains he was attacked while investigating new territory. Ray calls him bold, but Philip admits he just overcomes his fear. He adds that this happens whenever there's a chance for profit. Observing his aura, Ray realizes his motivation isn't purely materialistic. His eyes shine as he questions why Philip is so stubborn. Then he remarks that Philip seems to have known Kedrick for a long time. Surprised, Philip prepares to reveal the truth about their relationship. He reveals they were friends when they were just very small kids. Entering a flashback, Philip shows himself and Kedrick together as children. Running from a cook, he recounts that they were always weak on the streets. But when they found the hotel, they finally managed to get a place to stay. Smiling, Philip celebrates, saying they could finally open the hotel. Then, he asks Kedrick if he liked the new place too. Kedrick, however, looks away with a very serious expression on his face. Angrily, he questions if they are rats and how long they would live in hiding. Seeing the reaction, Philip says his friend was never satisfied with anything. He explains that Kedrick was always angry and trained his body obsessively. Hidden, Philip watched him train, not understanding the reason for such dedication, until, half a year ago, Kedrick simply left and abandoned the hotel. Back in the present, Philip says he started fighting nonstop. Ray comments that just training wouldn't be enough for him to start winning. Philip agrees, but says that suddenly the whole situation just changed. That was when his friend became very good at fighting, defeating everyone. Philip explains further that, more precisely, Kedrick got stronger all of a sudden. Intrigued by this, Ray asks if Kedrick always wore that kind of ring. Philip answers that he started wearing the ring recently to show off. So Ray deduces that Kedrick wasn't always so violent, leaving Philip shocked. Connecting the dots, Ray concludes that the change happened after he left the hotel. He then imagines Kedrick meeting the mysterious Walter while wandering the streets. In his imagination, Kedrick appears alone and completely hurt in a dark alley. Before him appears Walter, the mage Ray faced in the basement earlier. With a sinister smile, Walter stares at him, his eyes shining intensely. Showing a magic ring, he offers that item directly to young Kedrick. Kedrick's eyes then glow, indicating that he accepted the proposal. Back in the present, Philip says his friend started ignoring him on the street. Using his special ability, Ray analyzes Philip's aura and notices the color. He identifies that the pink color means sadness and deep mourning. Seeing the situation, Ray asks if Philip would like to try talking to Kedrick. Ray insists, asking if Philip doesn't want to make peace with his friend. Philip stays silent for a moment, just averting his gaze. Suddenly excited, he replies that of course he does if he can. With a focused look, Ray prepares to explain his plan in detail. Then he invites him to the battle, promising a chance to talk afterwards. With a smile on his face, Philip calls Ray's name, seeming grateful. But suddenly he changes his mind, saying that's totally impossible. Placing his hand on his chest, he explains that he simply cannot enter there. Showing a map, he says only the 3 big gangs can enter. Ray calms him down, saying he already warned Kedrick that he would take him along. Disbelieving, Philip thanks him for going so far just to help him. Maintaining his seriousness, Ray says there is no need for thanks just yet. Revealing the condition, he says that if he loses, Kedrick will execute him publicly. Completely shocked, Philip asks if he will really be executed in public. Nodding confirmation, Ray says that if Kedrick beats him, he dies. Philip asks if he's kidding, but Ray denies it repeatedly. Ray asks if he's afraid, hearing back that the executioner is already there. Trying to calm himself, Philip tells Ray not to worry, insisting that he won't die. With a serious look, Ray asks if there is any chance he could lose to Kedrick. Touching his shoulder, Ray waits for his companion's final decision. Maintaining his serious expression, he stares back without saying anything at all. Finally convinced, Philip says he understands and will go with him. Satisfied with the answer, Ray notes that this was a good decision. He adds that he'll need a favor once they arrive. With that, he reveals there is a second condition, leaving Philip surprised all over again. From outside, Philip's voice echoed. He asked if Ray was serious. Trying to hide his nerves, he called it a bad joke. Ray reminded him of his own words. He'd overcome fear for an opportunity. Looking him dead in the eye, Ray warned him. This was a serious business proposal. Still hesitant, Philip pointed out the crowd. They were from the 3 major gangs. He added that the other gang leaders would also be there. Because of that, a massive amount of money would be gathered at the event. But he worried about getting out in one piece, even if the plan worked. Ray reassured him. They only needed to worry about beating Kedrick. With absolute confidence, he claimed even 100 of them wouldn't be a real problem. The two stared at each other for a tense moment. Made up his mind, Philip grabbed a paper and pen from the side table. He handed them directly to Ray, ready to seal the deal. Excited now, he asked Chairman Ray to start writing the contract. 2 days later, the scene shifts to a view of the big city. Arriving at Kedrick's hideout, the day of the big battle finally began. Inside a packed arena, the two faced off in the center of the ring. Amidst the crowd, Philip watched as others chanted Kedrick's name. From above, the other gang leaders observed everything intently. Face to face, Ray and Kedrick braced for the start of the confrontation. Meanwhile, the crowd commented on Ray being an outsider hunter. Elsewhere, the crowd shouted that Kedrick couldn't possibly lose. People began placing their bets, putting their money down on Kedrick. Seeing the action, one man wondered who would ever bet on an outsider. In the stands, one spectator claimed they weren't there to make money. Smiling, he said he just came to see Ray get destroyed. Analyzing the crowd, Ray identified auras of excitement and also greed. Kedrick questioned him about coming alone. He had broken their previous promise. With an annoyed look, he asked if Ray was ignoring his final warning. Ray just replied not to worry, guaranteeing that he would arrive on time. Just then, the doors opened. Philip appeared in a wheelchair. Surprised, the crowd turned, wondering who else was arriving. Kedrick stared for a moment, recognizing the newly arrived figure. Then the crowd shouted Philip's name, finally identifying the newcomer. Confused, they wondered if the hotel staff would dare interfere in the fight. Kedrick yelled at the crowd, ordering everyone to be quiet immediately. He explained that Philip was a guest for the post-battle show. Extending his hand, he asked if that wasn't true, awaiting Philip's response. Maintaining a serious expression, Philip answered yes, confirming the statement. Ray turned away, observing the interaction between the two men from the ring. Philip and Ray exchanged a serious look, maintaining their silence. As Kedrick was about to begin, he was interrupted by Philip, who asked him to wait. Sitting in his chair, Philip announced that he was placing a bet too. The crowd reacted in shock to the total value, over 2 million. Opening the full briefcase, He said he was betting all his assets on Ray. In a flashback, Ray explained that all bets would be on Kedrick. Philip then said if he bet everything, everyone else would start betting out of sheer greed. Back in the present, the crowd went crazy and decided to bet everything on Kedrick. Completely swamped, the bookie could barely handle the influx of bets. In the ring, Kedrick asked if Ray had told Philip to make that bet. Smiling confidently, he said he'd gladly take the money. Impatient, one of the organizers told the referee to ring the bell. As soon as the bell rang, Kedrick charged in for the first attack. Watching the fist approach, Ray calmly waited for the right moment to react. He realized his opponent was much faster than before, but as he blocked, he noted the movements were sloppy compared to Humphrey's. Grabbing his arm, Ray prepared to break it in a single motion. Having his strike stopped cold, Kedrick was surprised by his opponent's strength. With immense force, Ray twisted his arm to create an opening. Kedrick laughed. He said Ray really could fight. Pointing at him, Kedrick called him a fun guy to face. Smiling sinisterly, he said he could finally fight with the intent to kill. As flames burned around them, Ray just stared back, refusing to back down. The crowd roared in the background as the two fighters clashed in the center of the arena. Spotting an opening, Ray surged forward again, readying a direct attack. But Kedrick dodged the blow, smashing his fist into the wall instead. The impressed crowd murmured, calling them both crazy but skilled fighters. Philip watched closely, realizing neither fighter had any intention of backing down. Surrounded by flames, they continued trading blows, stopping for nothing. Enraged, Kedrick screamed for Ray to die right there in the ring. Ray ducked under a high kick, timing his dodge perfectly. Planning his next move, Ray decided to take him down once and for all. He stomped on the ground, using the vibration to throw his opponent off balance. Seizing the moment, Ray grabbed him. Caught completely off guard, Kedrick couldn't react fast enough to escape. Ray held him firm, pinning both of his arms. Pinned to the ground, Kedrick yelled, asking if Ray thought he could just do whatever he wanted. He struggled with all his might, trying to break free from Ray's hold. Then Ray slammed him down with full force against the arena floor. Witnessing the impact, the crowd gasped, whispering that the blow could easily break bones. Philip wondered how such a small guy could be so incredibly strong. Impressed, the crowd admitted the hunter was better than they had given him credit for. Lying on the ground, Kedrick seemed completely out of the fight for a moment, but with a furious glare at Ray, he refused to accept defeat. Planting his hand on the ground, he slowly began to pick himself up. Back on his feet, he prepared to continue the fight, angrier than before. Gritting his teeth, he screamed that there was zero chance he would lose. Leaping toward him, he shouted Ray's name, his fist cocked back. He unleashed a direct punch aimed straight at Ray's face. Ray managed to defend himself at the last second, blocking the attack with his forearms. Keeping his arms crossed for guard, he continued defending against his opponent's heavy blows. Taking the hits head on, he struggled to withstand the impact. Realizing this wasn't going to end, Ray knew he needed a new strategy. His eyes focused, he remembered a lesson from his master. In a flashback, Niles explained that weight was the deciding factor in a fight. Back in the fight, Ray blocked another powerful attack from his opponent. Grinning, Kedrick continued his assault without showing any fatigue. Even though he was defending, the impact of the blows still hit him hard. In the flashback, Niles revealed that there was a way to overcome a weight difference. He explained that the technique to use was a joint lock. Back in the present, Ray stepped in and grabbed his opponent to counterattack. Using Kedrick's own momentum against him, Ray threw him over his shoulder. Landing on top, he quickly immobilized him with a rear naked choke. Pinned to the floor, Kedrick cursed him while trying to escape the submission hold. As Kedrick screamed, Ray just told him to submit and accept defeat. Refusing to lose, Kedrick activated the power of his magic ring. Using the ring's power, Kedrick managed to stand up. Seeing this, Ray realized that Kedrick was going to destroy his own body. With the ring glowing, Kedrick prepared for a final, desperate attack. But Ray managed to immobilize him again, grappling to tear the ring from his hand. Finally, back on the ground, the power of the ring on his hand began to fade. Yanking hard, Ray finally managed to rip the magical object from his finger. Confused, the crowd wondered if Kedrick had passed out in the middle of the arena. They questioned if Kedrick had lost, and what would happen to their money. Ray announced that he wouldn't be able to move for at least a few weeks. From a distance, Philip approached in his wheelchair, shouting Ray's name. Grabbing the money, Ray said he would keep it until the duel was officially over. Lying on the ground, Kedrick ground his teeth, refusing to accept he had lost. Struggling to his feet, he screamed that the fight wasn't truly over yet. Panting, he insisted that he didn't lose fights, and he wasn't weak. Suddenly, something struck him in the head, and a voice yelled out that he had lost. Revolted, the crowd threw things at him, blaming him for losing all their money. Back on the ground, he refused to accept that he was weak like everyone said. Screaming desperately, he ordered everyone to stop looking at him like that immediately. Suddenly, his hand erupted into flames, showing he had lost control. Terrified by the scene, Philip shouted Kedrick's name in total despair. Unleashing a burst of fire, he screamed that he was going to kill everyone there. As the fire spread, the chairs began to burn, and panic seized the crowd. Laughing uncontrollably, he threatened to burn them all until they were nothing but ash. Panic erupts. The crowd desperately scrambles to escape the spreading fire. As the entire arena burns, they rush toward the only available exit. Kedrick laughs maniacally, looking completely unhinged amidst the blaze. Wearing a terrifying grin, he claims no one will ever look down on him again. Suddenly, his body gives out. He crashes hard onto the arena floor. Ray realizes Kedrick can no longer move on his own. He starts to walk away, deciding to leave him behind in the fire, but he stops halfway. He looks back, calling out his name. Turning around in complete surprise, he sees what's happening right behind him. Philip gets out of his chair and rushes to help Kedrick, who is lying on the floor. Holding Kedrick, he begs them to leave this dangerous place together. He screams for Kedrick to wake up as the fire spreads across the entire arena. Struggling, he hoists him onto his back, insisting they need to hurry. Ray approaches and asks if he plans to drag him all the way to the chair. Surprised, Philip asks why Ray hasn't left yet. Watching the scene, Ray remains silent at his companion's behavior. With great difficulty, Philip asks for help getting Kedrick into the wheelchair. Ray just stares at the situation, unmoving, wearing a displeased expression. Now seated in the wheelchair, Kedrick remains completely unconscious and still. Philip asks what they're going to do. Ray tells him to take Kedrick and leave. Offering the money, Ray is questioned by Philip about his own plans. He replies that carrying 2 people out of the fire would be too much, even for him. Smiling, Philip assures Ray that he'll be okay. Gripping the handle of a knife, Ray stares at him silently for a moment. The image of a wounded man appears, telling him to go to a better place. He then asks what Philip gains by risking his own life to save Kedrick. Denying any calculations, Philip says he didn't think much before acting that way. Insisting on the question, Ray wants to know the real reason behind his actions. Smiling, Philip answers that he and Kedrick are friends, and he just wants to protect him. Hearing the answer, Ray freezes completely, showing no apparent reaction. Finding it all strange, Ray just observes his companion's attitude. A flashback begins. He remembers the children and questions what friends actually are. In his memory, the children offer food, saying they are his friends too. Then, he remembers the group happily fixing his raincoat. Thinking of Niles, he recalls being helped because he resembled his brother. Pale explains that he saved him because he couldn't watch him freeze right in front of him. Smiling, Pale says he would save him again because they are friends. Then, he just smiles, reinforcing the idea that they are true friends. Reaching out his hand, he questions if he had grasped the true meaning of friendship. Suddenly, a traumatic memory from his past emerges, showing him injured and alone. Sitting by himself in the rain, he concludes he couldn't have understood back then. With a lost gaze, he stares at nothing, still processing all those memories. Back in the present, Philip asks if he is really helping him there. Ray then picks Philip up in his arms. Philip asks what he's doing. Denying he inhaled smoke, Ray tears his own shirt without explanation. Suddenly, strange energy surges, leaving Philip shocked and unresponsive. With his ability activated, he creates strips of cloth for protection. Stammering, Philip asks if that's magic. Ray tells him to cover his mouth. While covering his mouth, Philip remembers thinking the investigation was useless. Having an idea, he suggests they can use water to put out the fire. Explaining that his magic has limits, Ray also covers Kedrick's mouth, but he warns that now Philip needs to answer his questions first. Then Ray asks directly what he thinks a real friend is. Questioning if that's important, Philip hears that the answer is very important. Coughing from the smoke, he answers that a friend is a friend. Saying their ideas are different, Ray asks for his definition of a friend. With shining eyes, Ray defines a friend as someone you've known for a long time. Philip just stares at him silently, listening intently to his definition of friendship. Philip finally understands the strange feeling he had while working with Ray. Calling his name, Philip warns that he isn't wrong, but something is missing. He explains it's someone who helps you and who you help back. Grabbing his clothes, he asserts that is what a friend is. Amidst the fire, Ray asks if Philip regrets his choices. Denying it, Philip says Ray was just responding to his feelings for Kedrick. He explains he means the desire to protect someone important. Smiling, he says this happens just because they are who they are. Repeating the phrase, Ray finally begins to understand the meaning of those words. Suddenly, the structure above them starts to collapse, falling in their direction. Seeing the falling debris, the two brace for the imminent impact. Ray realizes it's too late. He's really going to die. In a flashback, he remembers the night he fought the golem. He wonders why he tried so hard. since he couldn't pay the children. He questions if that was truly the only reason for his actions. Denying it to himself, he realizes the true motive was something else entirely. His hand glowing, he finally understands what he really wanted back then. Concentrating his energy, he realizes he wanted to keep living with those people. Unleashing all his power, he creates an explosion to protect them from the wreckage. Shocked by the explosion, Philip just observes what is happening around him. Extending his hand, Ray reveals he just wanted to manage to protect them all from destruction. Inside the barrier, Philip shouts that Ray raised his hand out of nowhere and saved them. Scared, he asks if that was his magic again, surprising Ray. Telling him to stay still, Ray places his hand on his shoulder without hesitation. Using his ability, he begins to heal his companion's injured leg. Philip says it's impossible since his leg was completely broken. Next, Ray uses the same power to heal Kedrick's wounds. Very grateful, Philip says Ray saved both their lives right then. Smiling, he promises he will never forget the great help. Ray replies that it was nothing, turning his face aside immediately. He warns that he will need them and that he also wanted to test his limits. Seeing they are still trapped, Philip asks what they will do next. Ray just says that now is the time for them to finally get out of there. Confused, Philip asks if he will use magic, but Ray simply shakes his head. Explaining the plan, he says all they need to do is wait. He then watches the flames, waiting patiently for the right moment to leave. Beside him, Kedrick remains unconscious, but protected from the fire's smoke. After the fire dies down, the crowd gathers outside the wreckage. Seeing the destruction, the gang members lament that their base has been burned. Desperate, one of them asks what they will do and where they will go now. The other leaders claim everything is Kedrick's fault. Saying they have nothing to do with it, they tell them to fend for themselves. Angry, a gang member curses the leaders for abandoning them there. Suddenly, Jonathan realizes in panic that he left Philip behind in the fire. Feeling guilty, he begins to cry for having abandoned his friend inside. Kneeling in front of the rubble, he stares at the smoke-covered entrance. The dense smoke then starts to dissipate slowly, revealing the passage. Crying, he looks up, noticing movement coming from the debris. Emerging from the smoke, a foot stomps down hard, breaking a piece of wood. Pointing to the entrance, Jonathan screams desperately for everyone to look in that direction. Walking out of the smoke, Ray calmly exits the arena wreckage. Shocked by the scene, the gang members can't believe what they are seeing. Behind him, Philip pushes the wheelchair with Kedrick still unconscious. Staring down the crowd, Ray warns them that if they really want to fight now, cracking his knuckles, he challenges everyone to try their luck against him once and for all. In front of everyone, he gets into position, ready to face the entire gang alone. Afraid of the threat, one of the gang members falls to his knees on the ground. Then, the others also kneel, showing their complete surrender to him. As the sun rises, the crowd just watches him in absolute silence. With a serious gaze, he stares at the wreckage like the new leader of the place. A tense situation was brewing in front of a large warehouse. Watching from above, some boys wondered why Philip was hanging around Kedrick's crew. Upon arrival, Ray stopped dead in front of the main building's entrance. He led Philip and the group of laborers to the door of their new shelter. Turning to face them, Ray told everyone to wait there until further orders. But Philip interrupted, asking him to hold on a second. Looking back, he focused on a boy who had hung back from the group. The boy was called to come inside, but he stood completely paralyzed. Crying, he said he couldn't return after abandoning Philip when he needed him most. Philip replied that it was okay. He would have done the exact same thing in his shoes. Saying he held no grudges, he invited him in, telling him this was his home now. After apologizing, the boy embraced him. Philip then asked if he could come in. Not understanding the reason for the question, Ray just told him to suit himself. Thankful, the group finally entered, with one mentioning that Ray was a good guy. Seeing all this, the other boys wondered if the hunter had taken over the hotel. Flashing a confident smile, Philip said that if they played their cards right, everything would get better. With a loud rumble, the large warehouse door finally opened for the group. Inside, everyone swarmed them, asking if Philip was okay and if he had won the duel. Seeing Kedrick's condition, the group commented on how injured and exhausted he looked. Philip didn't know how to move Kedrick, but then he heard Ray simply tell him to move out of the way. Wasting no time, Ray scooped Kedrick up, lifting him out of the wheelchair. Carrying the boy, he walked through the crowd as they parted to let him through. Later, Philip asked Ray about the things he had seen in the arena. Silent for a moment, Ray replied that he could use magic. Philip said he understood now, but knew he needed to handle the topic with care. Changing the subject, Ray said he preferred to settle their financial accounts first. He showed him the total gambling winnings, which added up to a small fortune. Handing over his share, Ray said he also wanted to make an important request. Curious, Philip asked what the request was, As Ray pushed the money toward him, he explained that their base had been burned down and asked Philip to find a new location. Adjusting his glasses, Philip told Ray to let him know if the payment wasn't enough. In response, Ray offered to find a base himself and also acquire the necessary furniture, but he refused to accept the money, leaving Philip curious as to why. Explaining, Philip said the split was wrong. Ray deserved much more. With a weary expression, Ray asked why he was worrying about that. Then Philip pushed a stack of cash toward him, insisting he just take it. Pushing the money back, Ray stated firmly that he couldn't accept it. Ray said he didn't understand, and Philip didn't know how to react. He then used his ability to analyze the energy emanating from young Ray. Noticing the scan, Ray asked if Philip happened to be worried about him. Philip questioned why he would worry about him, the strongest person in the sector. He clarified that he'd only be worried about the potential victims if Ray were an enemy. Still insisting, Philip said it wasn't concern, but about splitting everything fairly. He then proposed thinking of it as an investment in the security of his business. Finally seeing the logic, Ray agreed, and Philip perked up at the new deal. But then a boy warned them that Jeffer and Lotson had arrived with all their subordinates. Philip was clearly surprised, but Ray faced the situation with complete calm. Walking down the corridor, Ray explained that they had heard about the money and had only sent lookouts initially. He revealed he already knew about the spies, leaving Philip even more confused by everything. He said they would have had to face both gangs sooner or later anyway. Changing the subject, Ray questioned him about the investment conversation they'd had earlier. Stopping in front of the door, he announced that Philip was about to receive his dividends. As it opened, the two gang leaders commented that Ray had finally decided to show up. Jeffer taunted him, saying he thought Ray had died in the fire. Unfazed, Ray accused the two of starting the fire just to steal the money. Jeffer then turned to Philip, pretending to be disappointed by his supposed betrayal. He demanded straight out that they hand over all the betting money immediately. Not knowing what to do, Philip stammered as he tried to respond to the absurd demand. But Ray interrupted him and calmly said he would give them everything they wanted. After agreeing, he simply snapped his fingers, preparing for what was coming next. He tossed just a few coins in their direction, offering up the payment. Rolling across the floor, one of the coins stopped right near the leader's feet. He told them that was all they'd be receiving for their winnings. With an expression of pure rage, Jeffer called him a bastard for the mockery. Sending Philip ahead, Ray faced down Jeffer, who screamed for his men to grab him. Two thugs charged with weapons, yelling that he shouldn't have interfered. Seeing the weapons closing in, he braced himself for impact. Then, he activated a ring on his finger, ready to finally strike back. Ring on his fist, he stared down the two men rushing toward him. He lunged forward, intercepting their blows and shattering their weapons with his bare hands. The force of the block shattered the spiked bat instantly. Confused, Jeffer watched the boy render his metal pipe useless. Ray grabbed both men by their faces and slammed them hard onto the ground. With the two leaders down, Ray glared at the rest of the watching gang. Frozen, the other thugs just watched, unsure what to do. Bracing himself on the ground, he challenged the rest of the group, daring them all to come at him. One man yelled for everyone to attack, claiming Ray was already exhausted. Following the order, the entire gang rushed him, weapons drawn. Surrounded, he started fighting back, hitting multiple enemies at once. With his ring active, he kept fighting, showing zero signs of stopping. Amidst the chaos, he landed a direct hit on a thug's face. Without pausing, he attacked another enemy with a powerful punch to the gut right there. Watching from afar, one of the boys called the whole situation complete madness. They commented on how Ray was fighting alone, yet wasn't being pushed back. One of them remarked that seeing it all up close was cool as hell, but the other rebuked him, reminding him that Kedrick was still their leader. He shot back that everyone there complained about Kedrick behind his back anyway. Then they agreed it would be better if the hunter became their new leader. In the middle of the brawl, a thug ordered everyone to split up and invade the hotel. Seeing the new threat, the boys were totally surprised by the order. Hearing the plan, Ray turned around, nose bleeding, and asked what they had said. Suddenly, Kedrick's old gang charged forward to stop the hotel invasion. Spitting blood onto the ground, Ray remained standing, ready for whatever came next. Gathering his strength, he prepared to give a very clear order to everyone. Screaming at the top of his lungs, Ray ordered them to stop the invaders at any cost. With the order given, Kedrick's old gang started fighting the other groups. Confused, one of the boys repeated the order, trying to process the situation, but he soon realized it was an order from the hunter, and yelled for everyone to advance. Confused, an enemy claimed the real enemy was the hunter who defeated Kedrick. Throwing a punch, the boy yelled that the hunter was their new leader now. Taking the hit, the man asked why they would follow a complete stranger as leader. Meanwhile, a crowd tried to force their way in, but the door was blocked. Watching everything from above, someone followed the unfolding battle down below the hotel. Seeing Kedrick's gang helping, Philip and his group didn't understand what happened. Suddenly, Philip seemed to get an idea, and prepared to join the fight. Inside, they grabbed a large pipe to help defend the entrance. Seeing them join the fight, the enemies called them crazy bastards. Then one man threw something at the pipe, while another yelled for them to dodge. Hurling the large pipe like a battering ram, the group tried to take down the door in a single blow. Celebrating success, they shouted that they finally got past the door's barrier, but their celebration stopped when they noticed something completely unexpected straight ahead. On the other side of the door, Ray stood firm on the ground, apparently unharmed. He then caught the massive thrown pipe using only his hands. Disbelieving, one man yelled that the hunter was blocking the battering ram alone. They couldn't understand it, because Ray had been behind them just a second before the action. One of them screamed for everyone to push and crush the boy with the ram, but Ray continued holding back the pipe's advance with all his strength. The men started losing their balance, unable to push the object further. Using the pipe as a weapon, Ray spun around and hit everyone nearby. With the impact of the blow, all the men were flung far away. Watching the scene from the window, Philip wondered how any of that was possible. After knocking everyone down, Ray calmly rested the huge pipe on the ground. Defeated, the enemies fell to their knees, unable to get back up. Facing the remaining enemies, he observed them in silence for a brief moment. Seeing the scene, the thugs screamed to flee, saying they couldn't beat him. After everything, he finally relaxed and said he had reached his absolute limit. Hearing a shout of celebration, he lifted his face toward the sound. Praising his strength, the crowd called him Lord Hunter and their new leader. In front of everyone, he heard the crowd chant his name in a grand celebration. While watching the boys celebrate, he stood still, just watching the scene unfold. Not understanding the reaction, he just remained standing, observing the shouting crowd. Being pushed by the crowd, Philip tried to ask them to wait a moment. Getting up close, Philip looked at Ray, who seemed about to faint. Unable to hold on any longer, Ray finally passed out and fell backward onto the hard ground. With his eyes closed, he just lay there on the ground, completely motionless for a moment. Running over to him, Philip supported him while the other boys approached to help. In a totally unknown place, Ray wondered where he'd ended up. He was alone in the empty void. He kept walking, not understanding what was happening. Further ahead, he wondered if this was all a dream. He rarely had them. Suddenly, a mountain of debris appeared, making him stop to look at the obstacle. He climbed it to the end. Standing on top of the wreckage, he faced an approaching light. The light drew closer to him. He just watched it motionless for a moment. Seeing the light get near, he raised his arm to finally try and reach it. Just then, two figures identical to him also raised their hands toward the light. Reaching out, he finally approached to touch the object's surface, but upon contact, an invisible barrier started cracking right in front of him. The barrier shattered completely, releasing whatever was locked inside. It enveloped him, lifting his body upward. Floating in the unknown space, he looked around. He didn't understand what was happening. He wondered what it all meant. Then, his eyes reflected the scene unfolding before him. Suddenly, he woke with a start, shaken by the dream. Sitting up in bed, he wondered if he was in the infirmary at Philip's hotel. With a hand on his head, he said he seemed to have dreamed of something. Just then, two men entered the room and asked if he slept well. Then they asked if Ray was hungry, offering him a meal. Refusing the food, he asked them to tell him the date and time. After hearing the answer, he realized he'd slept there for an entire day. Getting out of bed, he announced he was going to leave the room for a moment. From above, he watched the boys talking about their new jobs and routines. Seeing the organization, he called out to a group passing down below. Approaching them, he asked if they needed help with any kind of work. One of them answered yes, saying they were strong enough. Awkwardly, the boys said they weren't bragging or anything. Then, one asked if Ray could help move shelves to the warehouse. Other boys offered to help too, since they had nothing else to do. While watching the boys interact, Ray used his ability to focus on one of them. With his eyes activated, he sensed a feeling of guilt coming from a boy. Going down the stairs, Ray surprised everyone, who shouted that the hunter had finally woken up. Several boys surrounded him, asking if he was okay and praising his fight. Not knowing how to respond, he just faced the barrage of random questions he received. Preparing to shout, he almost told everyone to go away, but was interrupted by a sound. Looking down, he heard a familiar voice, and wondered whose it could be. Suddenly, a man was seen running, and another shouted for everyone to stop him. Getting closer, Kedrick pulled a weapon hid in his clothes. Running toward Ray, he called his name and readied his attack. With his hand raised, Kedrick showed a scalpel, ready to hit Ray. But Ray asked the others to back off, saying he would handle it alone. Shouting that Ray was going to die, Kedrick advanced with the scalpel in hand. He then leapt at Ray, trying to land a direct blow to the neck, but the blade stopped inches from his face, unable to complete the attack. Staying still, Ray just stared at the tip of the scalpel nearing his eye. Unable to move, Kedrick shouted again that he'd kill him right there. Confused, he asked what was wrong, not understanding why he couldn't move. With his hand, Ray held his wrist with impressive strength and calm. Then he took Kedrick's hand and turned the scalpel against his own neck. Gritting his teeth, Kedrick just stared at the scene, unable to do absolutely anything. Ray explained that he didn't have the necessary conviction to take his life. Forcing his hand, Ray broke Kedrick's fingers so he'd drop the weapon. In great pain, he kept gritting his teeth, unable to react to the blow. Watching the scene, the other boys were paralyzed by what had just happened. Sighing, Ray just observed the situation with a tired look on his face. Holding the man's wrist firmly, Ray stopped him from doing anything. He then lifted the attacker's arm, immobilizing him completely on the stairs. With the man immobilized, Ray said that was enough and ordered him to follow. He then warned that the two of them needed to have a serious conversation right now. Philip apologized, saying he messed up by leaving blades in the infirmary. Ray responded that it was okay, since in the end, nobody got hurt. In the room, the three young men sat in a heavy silence. Talking to Kedrick, Philip asked if he really wanted to die before. Kedrick confirmed he was serious, making Philip ask the reason for it. He explained that he lost the duel, and now everyone would mock him. Trying to console him, Philip said that wasn't true and he would overcome it. Angry, Kedrick banged on the table and shouted, asking what he knew. He kept shouting that Philip knew nothing about his life. At that moment, something strange began to manifest in Kedrick's chest. Looking closely, Ray noticed his mana was disappearing quickly. Changing scenes, Veronica explained to Ray about charge stones. Back! Kedrick shouted desperately, asking why he was saved by Philip. Philip yelled back that he saved him because they were friends. Hearing that, Kedrick glared at him and asked if they really were friends. Kedrick shouted, reminding Philip that he tried to kill him and assaulted his men. He questioned how Philip could still call him a friend after everything. Philip replied that he must have had his reasons, but Kedrick told him to stop. Watching everything, Ray realized Kedrick didn't have red mana in his body. Then, Philip reminded them that they spent half their lives together. He insisted, asking why Kedrick did all those things. Holding his hand, Philip begged him to tell the truth. He asked that if Kedrick considered him a friend, to tell him everything. Very angry, Kedrick just wondered why he insisted on that. In a flashback, they appeared much younger, having fun as friends. Another memory showed Philip on the ground, hurt after being assaulted by Kedrick. Then, the memory showed the two smiling at each other. The past scene ended with their hands firmly joined. Back in the present, Kedrick questioned why he still called out to him. Starting to cry, he finally apologized to his old friend. Hugging Philip, Kedrick apologized through tears while his friend asked him to stop. He explained that he hated being weak, and that's why he got angry at others. Continuing, he said he used to work for gangs, but they always stole his money. So he decided he needed to get stronger on his own. He revealed that he trained every day, thinking about how to fight back one day. In a flashback, a man approached him and asked if they could talk. With a confident smile, Kedrick accepted the invitation for the talk, but he said it was a mistake and he ended up getting beaten badly. He counted that he couldn't go back to the hotel with his pride all wounded, so he started hating his friends to feel different and superior. It was at that moment that he found a person who changed everything. In an alley, Walter commented on his anger and asked what the reason was. Fallen on the ground, Kedrick replied that the reason was himself. He continued, saying he hated himself so much he couldn't take it anymore. Hearing the answer, Walter smiled and asked if that was really true. Offering a ring, Walter ordered Kedrick to take it immediately. Then he explained that the ring would help with a rare disease. With the object, Kedrick lifted a huge weight without any difficulty. Walter warned him never to take off the ring or the disease would return. Then he suggested forming a group to receive a bigger reward. Back in the present, Kedrick said he accepted the deal right away. Then, Ray interrupted him, saying he didn't get strong by curing a disease. He revealed it was all magic, showing the ring as proof. Desperate, Kedrick shouted, asking what he was saying, and asked for the ring back. Unable to believe it, he stared at the two completely paralyzed and silent. Explaining about mana, Ray said Kedrick had been deceived by magic. Looking at the flames, he repeated the word magic, totally in disbelief. Putting his hand on his head, he finally understood that it was all magic. He regretted not getting strong alone and returning to being weak, but Ray calmed him down, saying he didn't need to go back to being like that. Ray then placed the ring on the table, leaving Kedrick very surprised by this. Holding the ring, he warned that Kedrick only needed to follow his orders now. He guaranteed Kedrick would benefit much more from this alliance. Understanding nothing, Kedrick just stared back, waiting for an explanation. Bowing, Kedrick thanks them both and says his goodbyes before leaving the room. Right after, the apartment door clicks shut behind him. Then Philip asks if Ray is seriously making Kedrick the new lieutenant. Ray confirms the plan. He says he's leaving as soon as his work is done. In a flashback, Kedrick asks if Ray will teach him how to really fight. Explaining the technique, Ray tells him he'll be able to overcome size differences. Back in the present, Philip thanks him for looking out for his friend. He continues, saying that making peace was a very smart move. According to Philip, suppressing others with force isn't the best option. He warns that it can end up generating a lot of resentment and even lead to revenge. Reflecting on the subject, Ray wonders about problems he's had in the past. He believes oppression is best, but admits it doesn't generate loyalty. With that, Philip suggests using rewards, like the fighting lesson promised to Kedrick. Ray stays silent for a moment, seeming to think over the advice he received. Changing scenes, he notifies the group that they'll be staying at the hotel for now. Announcing the news, he says Kedrick will be the gang's new lieutenant. Some members whisper, thinking Kedrick finally learned a good lesson. Remembering the advice about rewards, he prepares to speak to the group. Holding a box, he announces he's going to return all the betting money. Shocked, they shout that they'll stand by his side no matter what happens. Whispering, Philip reminds him they need to solve the problem with Jeffer and Lotson. Changing scenes, Jeffer and Lotson appear tied up and gagged in a basement. Getting straight to the point, Ray asks if they know Veronica's shop. Gagged, Jeffer just shakes his head, denying knowing anything about it. Without warning, Ray delivers a hard slap to the tied-up man's face. Removing the gag, Ray tells him he hasn't grasped the situation he's in. As a response, Ray hits Jeffer with another slap without hesitation. With the man on the floor, Ray warns that wasn't what he asked. He then turns and rips the gag out of Lotson's mouth. Terrified, Lotson confesses that someone asked him to scare them because of the location. Asking who it was, Ray hears the request came from the general store owner. Hearing the answer, Ray closes his eyes for an instant and just reflects. Suddenly, he grabs Lotson's hair forcefully and pulls it. Right after, he lands a sequence of brutal punches on the man's face. With his face battered, Lotson can only grumble in pain on the floor. Covered in blood, Ray screams in rage after the assault he committed. Observing the scene, Philip concludes that this is Ray's true way of acting. Meanwhile, Philip continues to analyze the situation with great attention and care. Understanding the plan, he sees the action serves as an example for everyone. He realizes that if it's a calculated act, it is very cold and effective. After the beating, Ray gives the two fallen men a new task. Warning them to do it carefully, he tells them not to cause problems for the group. Threatening both of them, he says he'll hunt them down if anything goes terribly wrong. Terrified, the two men just moan in fear on the warehouse floor. Carrying the men on their shoulders, gang members leave the scene at night. Changing scenes, the group gathers for a big celebratory feast. At that point, one of the guys asks if anyone has seen the hunter around. He wanted to bring food, but Ray was already outside, alone. Looking out at the city, he stands with crossed arms, observing everything in silence. Philip's definition of friendship reappears in his mind now. Then the children appear, the only ones he has ever shown concern for. Afterward, he considers that he would also like to be able to call Niles a friend. Lying on the sofa, he asks himself if one day he will have friends again. He concludes it will be difficult, as his lack of emotions makes him different. Only Niles and the children have treated him without any prejudice so far. Suddenly, Philip arrives and offers him a cup with a hot drink. Saying it's cocoa, he comments that he thought Ray liked sweets. Philip asks if he can sit beside him, and Ray simply agrees. Without saying anything, Ray just takes the mug and takes a sip. After tasting the drink, he gets a very surprised look on his face. Just smiling, Philip watches Ray's reaction while he drinks. Holding the mug, he feels the heat coming from the hot drink. Under the starry sky, the hotel building falls completely silent. Ray tells the boy he's heading north and says goodbye in front of the hotel. He walks through the city streets toward his next destination. As he passes, one man hurriedly pulls another into hiding. Finally arriving at the bookstore, he stops in front of Veronica's shop. Almost immediately, someone opens the door from the inside. Veronica runs to greet him, saying he finally showed up. She explains she was very worried about his disappearance these past few days. Suddenly, she notices something on his face and stares in shock. Removing his hood, he reveals injuries. She asks if he was in a fight. Ray tries to answer, saying everything is perfectly fine. She denies it, saying he is not well, and starts using magic. Energy begins to concentrate right in front of her for a healing spell. Surprised, he watches the magic she tries to use on him. Just as she's about to heal him, she yells, realizing her mana has simply run out. Healing himself, he says he already took care of the wounds alone. Apologizing, Veronica says she didn't even think about that because he looked so hurt. Saying it's okay, Ray tells her it's time to finally see her grandfather. As he climbs the stairs, he calls out to ask a direct question. Looking back, he asks if she considers him a real friend. Surprised by the question, she stammers. He confirms what he just said. Reflecting on friendship, he wonders what criteria people use. Meanwhile, she thinks about how he saved her twice even though they haven't known each other long. Ray just waits for her answer, watching her in complete silence for a while. After thinking it over, she finally makes a decision about him. With a big smile, she confirms that yes, he is her friend. After hearing her answer, he just continues up the stairs to see her grandfather. Running after him, she calls out and asks for his answer. When he turns around, she asks if he also considers her a friend. They stare at each other for a moment, creating a tense atmosphere. Bluntly, he answers, no, leaving her totally shocked. Red-faced, she is completely speechless after his reply. Suddenly, an angry shout echoes from outside the bookstore. He tells her to go ahead, as he will return after feeding everyone. Ignoring the shout, Ray turns to open the bedroom door. He slowly turns the doorknob to enter the room. Inside, Graham was already waiting, lying on his bed near the window. Sitting down, he hears Graham say he's been sleeping more and more lately. Ray mentions hearing he got sick, and Graham confirms the news. Asking if he's going to die, Ray learns he has 6 months to live. Because of this, Graham announces he will start magic lessons today. Sitting in the chair, Ray replies that he thinks it's a great idea and agrees. But first, he shows the ring and asks Graham to explain what it is. Analyzing the object, Graham says it seems to be a type of charge stone. He continues the analysis, saying there is amplification and strengthening mixed in there. Explaining further, he says a spell strengthens the user's muscles. Looking closer, Graham says there is exploration magic mixed into the ring. Confused, Ray asks what exploration is, and the old mage clarifies. Graham explains that normal charge stones wear out with continuous use, but he warns that this stone consumes the user's vitality to repair itself. Asking if that's possible, Ray learns that vitality is mana. Graham then says that not just anyone creates this dangerous spell. Ray tells him the ring belonged to the previous leader, who got it from someone in Merc Red. Hearing the name, Graham's eyes widen, completely shocked by the information. So Ray asks if he knows the group, and Graham says it's impossible not to know them. He describes Merc Red as the most dangerous organization in the entire underworld. According to him, the group deals in all kinds of crime and is very secret. He reveals that the great danger is that they are all powerful mages. Ray asks if mages are common, but Graham immediately denies it. He explains that the red gem is the group's symbol and represents their addiction to mana. Impressed, Ray comments that Graham knows a lot about this secret organization. Remembering the past, Graham says he spent his youth searching for the so-called rainbow. He reveals that the story is known among rainbow hunters. With a serious look, he reveals that Merc Red possesses part of the rainbow. Receiving the news, Ray is completely paralyzed, unable to say a word. He questioned what he'd just heard. Was the rainbow just something in the sky? Graham explained that he found the Merc Red gems during his research. Seeing the item's high quality reminded him of an old story. As a gem of infinite light, the rainbow was a source of mana. Asking for a better explanation, he wanted to know what happened to the gem. So, the old mage began to tell a story from long ago. In a flashback, he recounted that the skies were clear and the land was plentiful. In the center of the first city, a gem shined with immense vital force. Its light made the lands fertile and could also cure the sick. But powerful people wanted total control of the rainbow. After a long war, the gem ended up shattering into 7 pieces. He asked if Merc Red had a fragment, and Graham confirmed it. He said he wanted to investigate further, but the organization was too dangerous. Then he remembered the man he faced in the bookstore basement earlier. After the conversation, he was certain Walter was a member of Merc Red. Making his decision, he stated he would investigate Merc Red thoroughly. He believed there must be a clue there about the mysterious rainbow. Seeing his determination, Graham said he wouldn't try to stop him at all. Respecting the mage, Ray agreed and said he would move forward with his plan. Saying that was all he knew, Graham returned the small fragment to him. He then asked if the boy would like to know anything else. Ray asked if it was possible to undo the spells on the magic ring. Opening the door, Veronica announced she was coming in to see her grandfather. Seeing the two of them, Graham announced he would start the lesson with the basics today. To begin, he explained that all magic starts with the formation of a circle. He continued, saying that circles prevent dangerous mana addiction. Passing through the circle, mana is refined according to each person's traits. Thus, there is a restriction on which spells each person can use. Remembering the mages he knew, he noted they all had different colored mana. To continue, he asked Veronica to explain the method for forming a circle. Starting the lesson, she said the first step is to gather mana in the hands. She then recommended he use a type of mana he already masters well. Next, the mana must be sent through the arms until it circulates in his heart. With the energy flow, a circle forms around the heart. Maintaining focus, she warned that the speed must increase without ever stopping. This movement needs to become increasingly fast and constant around it. Suddenly, the mana circle she was creating ended up undoing itself completely. Looking at her hands, she was surprised to have failed the demonstration. She explained that you need to maintain total control of the mana until the end. Graham told her not to be sad, as she was improving a lot every day. Even so, she regretted not being able to show him the complete circle. Graham asked if Ray would like to try doing the same process now. Closing his eyes, he focused to start the first stage of the spell. He began remembering the various types of mana he had used before. Following instructions, he pulled a type of mana he already knew well. Gathering red mana, he took it to his heart to begin. With the energy, a mana circle started spinning around his heart. Suddenly, a huge amount of mana exploded around his body. Keeping his concentration, he started sweating heavily from the effort. Seeing the scene, Veronica was completely shocked and didn't understand what was happening. So she asked her grandfather how he could do that like that. With his body almost exploding, the energy expanded throughout the room. Clutching his chest, he struggled to endure all the pressure on his body. Remembering his battles, he knew he had to endure whatever came next. For his goal, he remembered the children he needed to protect from everything. With wide eyes, he realized something very strange had happened there. Touching his chest, he wondered where the mana he gathered had gone. Instead, a different energy now began to surround his entire heart. Soon after, the red mana started spinning again with much more intensity. Finally, the energy stabilized, forming a perfect circle in his chest. With stabilized energy, a perfect mana circle formed in his heart. Looking down, he saw the mana circle glowing in his chest. Opening his eyes, he was totally paralyzed by the result of his spell. Touching his chest, he realized he finally managed to create his mana circle. Excited, Veronica held his hands, saying that was simply incredible. Smiling, she shouted that he actually managed to create a magic circle. Shaking him, she called him a genius, making Ray reflect on the word. Graham said that even he, a prodigy, took 3 months to achieve it. Asking for calm, Ray heard Graham say he is much more than a genius. Analyzing the circle, Graham explained that its elements are strengthening, weakening, and regeneration. Furthermore, he stated that all types of mana exist within Ray. In the scene, examples of mana appeared, like red, pink, and white. Surprised, Ray asked if Graham could see the mana inside his circle. Responding that he could feel it, Graham advised him to hide the circle by stopping the flow. Concentrating on his chest, he tried to stop the energy flow of the magic circle. The mana flow then interrupted, and the magic circle completely disappeared. Offering advice, Graham said it's better to hide the circle in daily life. Concluding, he explained that the circle needs to be exposed to use magic. Graham observed that he didn't seem the least bit tired from the process. Suggesting a test, Graham warned he would use a spell for him to copy. Joining his hands, he started concentrating his mana for the spell. He then created an object with a very complex shape using his magic. Asking if he could do it, Graham left Veronica completely unresponsive. She was shocked, as the magic was very complex and without any explanation. Without hesitating, Ray began replicating the magic object perfectly right away. Seeing that, Veronica and her grandfather were completely shocked by the scene. To test him further, Graham created other shapes much more complex than the first. He continued, even creating statues to see the boy's limit. Completely shocked, Graham admitted that his power surpassed all expectations. With the test finished, the old mage lay on his bed, very tired. Outside the room now, the two started talking about the test. Impressed, Veronica asked how he managed to do all that so easily. He replied that he just tried and it worked, leaving her very irritated with that. Smiling, she said he is really incredible anyway. Going down the stairs, she said he is the most talented mage she had ever seen. Suddenly, he called her, making her turn to look at him. Ray then asked if she felt envious of the power he just showed. Not knowing what to answer, she stuttered and said maybe she felt a little. He continued, asking if she didn't feel anger or hate him for it. The boy explained that the people he knew always felt that about him. She then confirmed she felt envy, but not the way he imagined. After thinking a little, she put her hand on her head to decide. Then she said she felt envy, but not jealousy, leaving Ray very confused. She continued, saying that maybe it's because they are real friends. Hearing the answer, Ray was completely paralyzed and without any reaction. He asked if friends don't feel jealous of each other, but she denied it. With a sinister smile, she said he needs to accept the friendship soon. In a flashback, Pale offered half his cookie for him to eat. Saying he understood more or less, Ray seemed to agree with her explanation. With a worried look, Veronica stared at him in silence for a brief instant. Walking ahead, she said he really is a very strange boy. He just heard her comment without responding or showing any reaction. He then called her by name, making her ask what he wanted. With a serious expression, he asked if she could teach him to read. She repeated the question, wondering if she herself could do such a thing. With her hand on her face, she seemed to think about the proposal he made. Full of determination, she shouted that she would teach him to read anyway. Before they started, she warned there was something to be done first. He stared at her, expecting her to ask for something dangerous in exchange for the favor. Preparing for the worst, he asked what he needed to do for her. Smiling, she ordered him to go take a bath on the second floor. Totally without reaction, he heard that she was going to get clean clothes for him. The scene shifts to the bookstore, focusing on Veronica. She turns suddenly, asking Ray if he's finished up. Just stepping out of the shower, Ray loudly asks where he should leave his towel. Seeing him in that state, Veronica turns bright red and freezes completely for a moment. He notices her staring and asks why she's looking at him like that. Reacting with a jolt, she yells that it's nothing and orders him to get dressed. Once they are sitting at the table, she questions why he wants to learn to read. With a distant look, he replies that his main desire is just to be able to read books. He explains that to continue his journey, he's going to need a lot more knowledge. Recalling the past, he mentions he learned the basics from Niles, but nothing formal. Hearing this, she offers to teach him herself, since the bookstore can't open anyway. He then asks about the bookstore, leaving her confused by the sudden question. With a confident air, he tells her she can open it now because those guys won't be coming back. Terrified, she asks if he killed them, but he denies doing that. Slumping into her chair in relief, she tells him he really scared her with that. Cheering up, she says she'll open the shop as soon as their lesson is over. To begin their studies, a massive pile of books is placed on the table. Pointing to the stack, she explains these are her study materials and notes. When she adds that it took her about a month to compile, he's left speechless. Determined, he says he'll give it his best shot, and she promises to put in effort too. Starting the class, she begins explaining the material using a blackboard. Afterwards, she asks if it's too difficult, but he guarantees he understood everything perfectly. He suggests she give him practice problems to solve right now. Grabbing a pencil, he starts writing answers with incredible speed. In less than a minute, he hands in the exercise, saying he's finished. Correcting the first question, she sees his answer is completely right. Looking over the rest of the page, she's shocked by the results. Smiling, she shows him that he missed only a single question on the test. Happy, she says. At this pace, they'll advance through the material very quickly. Suggesting they stop for today, she adds there's one more thing to discuss. With a serious expression, she reveals she has a request for him. A bit awkwardly, she asks him to observe her while she casts a circle. He replies that he doesn't think he'd be much help since he doesn't teach well, but she insists she only wants him to watch and give his opinion. He agrees to do it as payment for the lessons. With a huge smile, she thanks him for accepting. Returning to organizing, she starts tidying the books stored in the shop. While she works, he asks if he can read the books lying around. She lets him, but asks if he can manage it alone yet. To help, she tells him to look for a dictionary on a specific shelf first. Carrying things, she explains the book helps with words he doesn't know. Curious, he asks if the dictionary defines rainbow. Unsure, she says, since that's related to magic, probably not. Grabbing the book, he says he understood her explanation. Suddenly, a different book on the shelf catches his eye. Standing out from the rest, it begins reacting to his presence. Taking the book, he holds it firmly. With his magic, he can now levitate several heavy books simultaneously. He realizes the ring's mana makes everything easier, and plans to test other spells. Analyzing the ring, he discovers the mana is divided into red, pink, and white. Remembering the past, he recalls the difficulty he had using one specific type. Now he notices the mana inside the ring no longer feels so rigid. He understands he can discover new spells through experimentation, but for some reason, he feels a great reluctance to continue testing. It becomes clear then that pink mana is directly linked to sadness. A painful memory from his past resurfaces, acting as a self-protection instinct. Because of this, he developed a strong repulsion to anything linked to sadness. Back to reading, he confirms the word he sought isn't in the dictionary. Flipping through the book, he suddenly finds a very familiar symbol. He's shocked to realize what it actually means for him. Standing up abruptly, he warns Veronica that he needs to leave for a moment. Confused, she asks where he's going, but he just asks her to leave the books. Running out of the store, he finally understands what was really happening. He realizes that man's real objective was something else from the very beginning. In the book, he finds the word offering, and its meaning tied to a ritual. An image of an animal sacrifice perfectly illustrates the concept. With this information, he starts connecting the dots regarding that man's plan. It became clear the intention was to offer street children for some kind of ritual. It all seemed directly connected to the red gem and the magic ring. Putting the pieces together, he remembers that Kedrick's group was nearing 66 members. So, Walter was just waiting for Kedrick's final report on everyone. Later, he goes to a restaurant and finds a table full of food. Totally surprised, he mentions he only ordered a simple drink. Smiling, the boy explains that the other children paid for everything. Asking about Walter, he discovers the man was 3 hours late today. He secretly shares that he saw Walter smiling, saying the time was coming. Thoughtful, he eats a little while analyzing all the new information. Meanwhile, the scene shows the Grand Merc Red building with a rainbow. Heading underground, he knows he can't investigate without knowing when they'll return. Standing in an alley, he seems to consider his next move. Walking down the street, he spots a small group of boys chatting ahead. He keeps watching, staying silent and attentive to the group's movements. Meanwhile, one boy brags that he punched someone. Coming up from behind, he puts a hand on the boy's shoulder and asks for his attention. Annoyed by the interruption, the boy whirls around, ready to throw a punch. Then, the boys are shocked to realize it's the famous Hunter. Completely scared, they ask what Mr. Hunter wants with them. Remembering some advice, he recalls Philip saying to use the right tactic. He explains he wants to be warned when the man appears, promising a reward. As a reward, he offers a full meal directly from that famous local restaurant. Imagining all that food, the three boys' mouths water just thinking about it. Yelling in unison, they guarantee they'll do their best to complete the task. Deal closed. He goes down the stairs and quietly leaves the area. Reaching the door, he prepares to finally enter the underground hideout. Then he notices a new lock that wasn't there before. He tries to pick the lock with magic, but something seems wrong. Suddenly, the lock reacts violently, completely repelling his magic. He wonders if Walter placed some kind of protection spell on it. Weighing his options, he knows that if he breaks down the door, he'll be discovered. But one of the boys appears running, screaming for Mr. Hunter on the stairs. Desperate, the boy warns that the man they are looking for just arrived. He wonders if he'll be recognized, since it was dark before. Walter passes right by him as he leans against the wall to avoid attention. Stopping suddenly, Walter stares at him with a serious expression, analyzing the boy. Unfazed, he just stares back, maintaining his firm posture. Seeing he wasn't recognized, he's relieved to have gotten the information. Cutting to the next day at noon, the scene shows an overview of the city. Leaning against the wall, Ray and Kedrick wait together for the upcoming meeting. Kedrick seems a little insecure about the plan, but Ray tells him to just obey. Suddenly, the boy is shocked to realize the figure approaching them. Arriving with an intimidating presence, Walter walks toward the two young men. With a serious look, he stares at them from afar, showing no emotion. Bowing, Kedrick greets him, saying, "It's been a long time, Professor." Walter tells him to stop with the formalities and show his face. But before the report, Walter interrupts him, putting a hand up. Looking at the boy beside him, he asks directly who that is. Explaining the situation, Kedrick says the boy is the group's new vice leader. With a quick gesture, Walter grabs him and orders him to raise his head. Getting close to his face, the man asks his name in a threatening tone. After a short pause, he answers the man with the name Niles. Raising his face, he reaffirms with conviction that his real name is Niles. Analyzing the boy, Walter seems to accept the explanation. He then tells him to work hard, believing that he really didn't remember anything. Asking about the group, Walter wants to know how many people have been gathered so far. Kedrick assures him he is choosing only the strongest, according to the agreed conditions. Satisfied with the answer, Walter starts laughing in a very sinister and scary way. Laughing loudly, he says the boy is doing a very good job. He promises to take Kedrick to the organization as soon as the target number is reached. Walter explains they got lucky because the organization wants to train a new unit. Excited, Kedrick says meeting his master was a true blessing in his life. But privately, he thinks Walter has lost his mind, since no one from the organization would dress poorly. Raising his hand, Ray asks permission to ask an important question. He asks which sector headquarters is in, but Walter denies the existence of branches. Using his ability, he realizes Walter is telling the truth right then. Changing his mind, Walter says headquarters is in Sector 43. However, Ray notices his mana waver, indicating it was a lie. So he decides to ask one more question, wanting to know another important thing. Asking what the boss is like, he makes the man completely tense. Turning to the boy, Walter seems to think carefully about his answer. With a frightening expression, he slowly repeats the word boss. Then he seems to go into a trance, repeating the same word. In his mind, an image appears of him bowing before a giant figure. Coming back to reality, he says the boss is an incredibly amazing person. He continues, saying no one would dare even look in his master's direction. Using his ability, Ray detects a strong feeling of admiration coming from the man. But he can also perceive an overwhelming fear within that admiration. Changing the subject, Walter asks when Kedrick is moving to the new location. He then warns he'll be back in 3 days to check on the new boys. Seeing the man turn away, Ray discreetly activates his ability again. With a hand movement, he creates a trail that starts following him. The trail extends, marking the entire path Walter is taking. Then he realizes Walter is releasing his mana entirely on purpose. Using the whole factory as a canvas, he draws a huge circle on the floor. With one last movement, he finally completes the drawing of that massive magic circle. Then he puts his hand inside his coat to grab something hidden. He pulls out several hidden pieces of a broken gem. Scared, Kedrick asks what that thing is the man just showed. Smiling, Walter says it's something very good while activating the gems. Floating in front of him, the gems leave both boys completely on alert. Seeing that, Kedrick says it looks dangerous and asks if everything is okay, but Ray responds calmly that it's fine, trying to soothe his partner. Next, the gem pieces scatter at high speed throughout the area. Each piece falls exactly onto a specific point of the magic circle on the floor. With the gems positioned, the great magic circle finally begins to activate. Then, all the circle's energy begins to concentrate at one point. Trying to calm him down, Walter says it's the same gem from Kedrick's ring. Explaining the gem, Walter says it cures diseases and increases vitality. He then warns him to be very careful with the gem he just received. Holding the boy, Walter prepares to give one final, very important warning. With a threatening tone, he tells him to treat the ring like his own life. The boy promises he will remember that warning about the ring well. After everything, he advises he'll be back in 3 days and exits through the door. The warehouse door closes with a very strong, decisive thud. Falling to the ground relieved, Kedrick screams that the man finally left. Still on the floor, he asks what Walter is planning to do with all of that. Ray responds calmly that that is exactly what the two of them are going to find out. Sending him back to the hotel, Ray lets him know he still has something to do there. Alone in the warehouse, he observes the large magic circle from upstairs. Analyzing the design, he realizes it's related to some kind of magic. So as not to forget, he begins writing everything he is observing in his notebook. But he mentions he already knows someone who might have an idea of what it is. Back at the bookstore, Ray sought help from an expert. He opened his notebook, showing the sketch he'd made of the complex magic circle. Presenting the book, he waited for a detailed analysis of his discovery. Graham immediately asked if the drawing had anything to do with the Merc Red executive. Taken aback, Ray confirmed it, wondering how the mage had guessed the situation so quickly. With a long, heavy sigh, the old mage revealed his deep concern. He warned Ray that he had gotten involved in something dangerous, confirming that it was indeed a magic circle. Confused, Ray asked about the circle, and the mage confirmed his fears again. Explaining the technique, he said it drastically amplified the power of a spell, but as he analyzed the drawing more closely, he noticed something far more impressive. With absolute certainty, he declared that it was a completely perfect magic circle. Then, the mage realized the most surprising thing wasn't the circle itself. He was shocked that Ray had managed to redraw it all without any formal magical training. He explained that tracing the mana of a circle was like redrawing it entirely. That task was comparable to trying to organize extremely fine strands of hair. It was as if he had to differentiate each individual strand using only his sense of touch. Graham explained that it should have been impossible to do without knowing the circle intimately. Impressed, he said the drawing was flawless, as if Ray could actually see the circle itself. Pointing to the notebook, Ray asked about the function of that specific magic circle. The old mage revealed that it was a powerful type of exploitation magic. He said it was the exact same spell cast on the ring Ray had shown him earlier. Confirming the suspicion, Ray noted that the magic was the same, but much stronger this time. With a grim expression, Graham began to explain what happens when the ritual is activated. Inside the circle, a person has their vital energy completely drained. Unable to react, the target has their energy forcefully extracted by the magic circle. Transformed into a vortex, their life force rises straight into the sky. When the process is finished, only dark smoke remains at the ritual site. He explained that the victim's life force converted into pure magical power. Hearing all this, Ray finally understood exactly what was happening. Putting the pieces together, he concluded that the gang was going to be used as a sacrifice in the ritual. But a doubt still lingered in his mind as he analyzed the situation. The mage explained that a human couldn't use such concentrated mana directly. He continued, saying that life mana was toxic and would poison the user. Therefore, the mana was used to strengthen a magical creature or tool instead. The mage added that there was no reason to strengthen an ordinary stone, as they had limits. However, he emphasized that things would be different if it involved that specific ring. With a serious demeanor, he called Ray by name for an important conversation. The old mage then asked what he planned to do with this information. Ray remained silent for a moment, deep in thought, reflecting on his next move. Lifting his head, he seemed to have reached a final decision. 3 days later, the scene shifted back to the abandoned factory where it all began. At the appointed day and time, Ray was already waiting outside the gate. Soon, Walter appeared, walking with firm steps toward the agreed-upon location. Arriving there, he asked where Kedrick was. Finding the boy's absence strange, Ray replied that Kedrick was inside and that he had come to welcome him personally. With a smile, Walter beckoned him to enter the warehouse immediately. Believing the job was well done, he opened the door without suspicion. Ray said nothing, simply watching as Walter stepped inside. As he entered, Walter smiled, ready to meet the group, but the door suddenly slammed shut behind him. Staring at the closed door, Walter realized the warehouse was completely empty. Confused by the scene, he shouted, demanding to know what was going on. He spun around, realizing there was absolutely no one else in the building. But before he could react, he saw something rushing toward him. In a surprise attack, Ray lunged and struck with a knife. The blade nearly grazed Walter's neck, but he managed to block it. Walter demanded to know what Ray thought he was doing. Instead of answering, Ray simply concentrated a massive amount of energy into his hand. Sensing the energy, Walter was shocked to realize it was magic. Before he could react, he was nearly hit squarely by Ray's powerful strike. He dodged the attack, then drew his weapon, screaming at Ray and asking who he thought he was messing with. Realizing he was trapped, he bolted for the door, yelling that it was locked. Turning back to the boy, he demanded to know who he really was right then and there. With the dagger in hand, Ray simply spoke his target's name, Walter. Then, he revealed that he had come under orders from the boss to finally put an end to him. With a dawning smile, Walter realized Ray was an assassin sent to eliminate him. Laughing at the situation, Walter says he must already know about the magic circle. He then reveals the magic will activate exactly at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Calmly, Ray just notes that it's still only 2:15 on his watch. Wrapping his feet in flames, Walter calls it a blessing in disguise. With an evil grin, he shouts that he'll sacrifice the assassin instead of the brats. Charging forward in flames, he attacks with everything he has, screaming for the assassin to die. Unfazed, Ray simply holds his dagger, ready to counter the attack. Outside, Philip watches everything from afar with a pair of binoculars, but Kedrick says you can't see anything because all the windows are blocked. Almost shouting with worry, Kedrick insists there's no way the hunter can lose. Asking for silence, Philip points to Veronica, sitting right behind them. Kedrick whispers, asking if she really is a mage like the rumors say. Philip approaches Veronica and asks if that is indeed her name. She then asks if he isn't worried about Ray inside the warehouse. Confused, he asks why she isn't worried about what's happening. Back at the fight, Ray defends against fire strikes using his dagger. Meanwhile, she reveals that Ray is the most talented mage she has ever seen. Finishing her thought, she adds that he's incredible even without using any magic. That is why she concludes she's not worried about the fight's outcome. Just then, Walter jumps into the air, coming down with his weapon to attack the boy. With total confidence, Veronica states once again that she believes in Ray's victory. But Philip notices that despite her confidence, her hands are trembling violently. Meanwhile, her hands shake non-stop, showing all her apprehension. After hearing this, they agree they need to believe in the hunter's victory. He then prepares a counterattack, positioning the dagger for his next move. Walter advances again, surrounding his body with flames for the attack. Smirking, he yells for the assassin to give up fighting right now. Without moving, Ray stares him down, focusing on the fight's next beat. With a fixed gaze, he prepares to use his own magic in the battle. He then begins channeling magic, readying his dagger for the final attack. Thrusting forward, he attacks Walter, who blocks the blow with his own blade. The impact force sends Walter's weapon flying. Walter recognizes the magic, questioning how he uses multiple elements simultaneously. Seizing the opening, Ray closes in and lands a direct punch to his face. Without averting his gaze, he finishes his attack move with total precision. Walter is thrown forcefully backward, flying through the abandoned warehouse. With his neck armored in metal, he screams at the boy, calling him a rat. Noticing his broken dagger, Ray realizes the ideal move would be using a magic circle. Walter then asks if he's just stalling for time for the circle on the ground. Revealing a circle on his chest, Walter prepares to use his own magic. He questions if Ray thought he would let that happen so easily. Using his magic, he summons a giant fire serpent to attack Ray. The creature looms over the boy, ready for the final strike. Taking a step back, Ray steadies himself on the ground, preparing his next action. Mouth wide open, the serpent charges at high speed toward him. Shouting, Walter says it's useless. The serpent won't disappear anytime soon. Just then, the ground cracks beneath his feet, showing the strength of his own magic. With a leap, Ray manages to dodge the serpent's attack by a hair, but the serpent turns quickly and attacks again, following all his movements. Pausing for an instant, he knows he needs to find a way to end this. He then realizes that Walter's movements are limited by controlling the flames, so he propels his body forward, cracking the floor with the force. Seeing Ray run toward him, Walter prepares for the serpent to strike. He yells, asking if Ray thinks such a cheap trick will work. Responding, Ray says he knows his opponent is a second circle mage. Remembering Veronica's help, he prepares to use what she taught him. Placing his hands on the ground, he begins to draw his own magic circle. From the circle, a gigantic water creature emerges to face the fire serpent. He reveals that he asked Veronica to teach him to draw that specific circle. With his water magic, he prepares for the final confrontation between the two. Seeing the water magic, Walter screams that is not first circle power. Surprised by the scene, he stares at the boy, not understanding the magic's power. Then Ray commands his attack, making Walter scream the word assassin once more. With one last movement, he launches all the magic from the circle against his opponent. After it all ends, he just stands there with a scratch on his face. The battle was finally over. Walter lay slumped on the ground, completely defeated by Ray. Sitting on the wet floor, he looked totally exhausted from the intense confrontation. Checking his watch, Ray realized it was 10 minutes to 3. Struggling to his feet, Walter said he needed to leave immediately. He claimed he had to return and report directly to his powerful boss. But as he turned to leave, Ray called out, ordering him to stop right there. Ignoring the command, Walter kept walking and grabbed the doorknob. Then Ray threatened to destroy the ring if he didn't step away from the door right now. Walter replied it was useless. The executive's items were totally different from normal ones. Needing to buy time, Ray asked who told him such a thing. He questioned if Walter really believed red stones couldn't be destroyed. Explaining the weakness, he said a combination of elements could crack the stone. With the ring in hand, he showed that the item could be destroyed easily. Hearing the explanation, Walter just gritted his teeth, seething with anger at the situation. Turning furiously, he threatened to rip Ray's limbs off before leaving. Unafraid of the threat, Ray calmly told him to go ahead and try. In a quick movement, Ray threw the ring high into the air, distracting his opponent. Sprinting at high speed, Walter rushed to catch the ring before it landed. Desperate, he threw himself onto the ground to grab the ring in time. With the ring in his hands, he prepared to use it, but Ray snatched it away. Walter was confused and watched Ray walk away. Yelling in rage, Walter got up, ready to attack the boy once more. But Ray threw a small sphere toward the center of the abandoned warehouse. He said there were still 5 minutes left, and that was fine by him. Walter realized he needed to catch the assassin and get the ring back. Suddenly, the magic circle on the floor began to activate, surprising everyone. Yelling, he questioned how that was possible, since there should have been plenty of time left. Opening the door, Ray explained that Walter didn't know a very important detail. Remembering Veronica's advice, the limit for accelerating magic was 5 minutes. Inside the circle, Walter was consumed, realizing the circle had been tampered with beforehand. In his final moments, he could only scream for help from his powerful boss. After the ritual, Ray opened the door, letting dark smoke billow out of the warehouse. On the floor, Walter's body vanished, leaving only his clothes behind. Beside the clothes, the magic ring he wore remained intact on the ground. Picking up the ring, Ray felt the item's mana flow directly into him. Outside, the group waited, convinced there was no way the hunter could lose. But suddenly, Veronica felt something strange in the air, her eyes going wide with fear. She screamed that the mana was out of control, leaving everyone else terrified. Confused, the boys decided to follow her to see what was happening. Running toward the warehouse, they yelled, asking what was wrong. Scared by what they saw, they stopped suddenly and questioned what it was. From inside the warehouse, a fiery footprint appeared on the ground, indicating a presence. Covered in flames, Ray emerged from the warehouse, leaving the group totally shocked by the scene. Seeing that, Veronica shouted that it was mana poisoning and Ray was in danger. Not knowing what to do, the two boys just watched, completely paralyzed with fear. Acting on impulse, Kedrick grabbed a pipe and a metal plate from the ground. He then announced that with their leader in danger, they had to act. Jumping into the attack, he tried to put out the flames using the metal plate. Ray grabbed him by the arm, making Kedrick scream in pain from the burn. With a quick movement, Ray threw the boy aside without moving from his spot. Desperate, Philip shouted for Ray to wake up and come back to reality. He kept yelling that it was Philip, hoping to be recognized by him. Ignoring the call, Ray formed a fireball and aimed it at them. Terrified by the imminent attack, the two boys screamed with nowhere to run. Jumping in front of them, Veronica created a barrier and blocked the fire attack. Holding the barrier, she shouted that there were only 2 ways to stop Ray. She said they needed to put out the flames, making Philip suggest a fire truck. Yelling, Philip asked if she could hold on for 5 minutes, and she agreed with effort. Concentrating a huge ball of energy, Ray prepared to launch his strongest attack. With a gesture, he made a column of fire rise forcefully from the ground. Shocked by the scene, the two boys just watched, unable to react to the power. Raising both hands, Veronica tried to create a barrier to stop the devastating attack. The boys screamed her name while she realized she wouldn't be able to block it. She then closed her eyes and said she was okay, despite the whole situation. With a smile, she said her only wish was for him to be safe. After fighting with Walter, He holds the ring in complete silence. Suddenly, a powerful energy begins to pour from the item in his hand. Seizing the opportunity, he understands he can use all this power. His eyes widen as he receives a completely unexpected vision. A memory emerges. Walter begging for his life, asking not to be beaten. Amidst the fire, the man screams desperately, saying he stole nothing. Tear-streaked, he keeps denying the accusation made against him. Questioning himself, he realizes he is seeing another man's memories. Being consumed, the vision shows Walter inside a whirlwind of flame. Another memory arises, with him saying he needed to get stronger at any cost. He then promises that by becoming stronger, he could avenge everyone he lost. Echoing in his mind, the word vengeance reflects in the flames of memory. Continuing, the memories show voices ordering him to surrender his body to rage. Those voices continue, screaming at him to kill everyone, leaving no one behind. Influenced by the memories, a single final order appears before him. Unleashing the ring's power, Ray launches his attack while Veronica defends herself. Desperate, Philip shouts Veronica's name, seeing the danger of the situation. Clasping her hands together, Veronica smiles calmly in the face of his power. Instantly, a completely different light reflects in Ray's eye. Then all the energy transforms into a sphere of white light. Impressed by the scene, he says that light is very beautiful. With a simple gesture, he manages to hold all the energy in the palm of his hand. He then looks around, confused not to see the flames anymore. Seeing his confusion, Veronica shouts his name to get his attention. 3 days passed. The scene changes to Philip's hotel. In the infirmary, Veronica asks if he can get some water. He promptly hands over the glass and she thanks him for the small favor. In silence, Ray just watches the girl while she rests in bed. It was explained that she used too much mana and needed rest. Taking advantage of the situation, she asks him to pick up a few more things for her. As he leaves, she says with a smile that paying debts is her principle. Sitting down, Veronica asks if he was suffering from mana poisoning, and he confirms. He then explains that the main cause was continuing to use unpurified mana, all because of the charge stone that the man possessed in that ring. Worried, she tells him her grandfather warned about this type of mana being poisonous. Closing his fist, he guarantees her he won't use that anymore. Relieved, Veronica agrees that he shouldn't, at least for now. Afterwards, she prepares to say something else, looking directly at him, but Ray interrupts her and sincerely thanks her for helping him. Surprised by his attitude, she just stares at him for an instant. She then asks why he said that, and if he is still feeling sick. At that moment, a hand pushes aside the curtain, interrupting the two's conversation. It was Philip, appearing at the entrance and asking if now is a good time. Changing scenes, Philip delivers a box with the belongings he requested. Without wasting time, Ray grabs one of the notebooks from the box. Inside the box, he finds an old photograph of Walter with several children. Looking closely, he notices that the faces are blurred and hard to see. Then Philip shows another notebook, saying it seemed to be something quite important. Reading the notebook, he realizes they are complete orders from the Merc Red organization. Turning the page, he continues his investigation into that man's notes. There, it was written about a failure while investigating a specific green gem. Continuing to read, he sees more failures, now with gems of other colors. Connecting the dots, he suspects that Merc Red is seeking the rainbow fragments. Decided, he says this is already reason enough for a full investigation. Seeing his expression, Philip asks if he is really going to leave the sector soon. Handing over a bag, Philip says it's the payment with a gratitude bonus, but Ray warns that payments will continue being delivered to him daily. With a smile, Philip says he will say goodbye to him when the date is decided. With a look a bit distant, Philip remains silent for a brief moment. Extending his hand toward him, Ray calls him by name. With an unexpected invitation, he asks if Philip wants to go along when he leaves. Without knowing how to react, Philip is completely paralyzed by the proposal made. Suddenly, he shouts very loudly, totally shocked by the boy's invitation. Asking if he is serious, he hears Ray confirm the invitation. Agitated, he says he has never left the sector and that he would leave everything behind. Ray then begins to speak about the true reason for Philip saving money. Revealing everything, he says that his goal was always to leave that place. Bringing up a memory, Philip realizes that Ray remembered their conversation. In that remembrance, he recalls moments that led him there. Joining his hands, he remembers what he said that specific night. With a serious expression, he finally reaches a conclusion about the proposal. Taking his decision, he notifies Ray that he is going with him. But in exchange, he asks for some time to pass on his tasks at the hotel. Saying that 2 weeks is enough, he sees Ray agree with the deadline. That time passed, Philip says goodbye to friends before the departure. As the days pass, Philip organizes the final details of his leaving. Already in the car, Ray takes advantage of the time to continue all his studies. Paying a visit, he also talks with Graham, who continues in bed. Later, he meets with Veronica to continue her writing training. There, she warns that she has nothing left to teach, calling him a genius, but he replies that she is the one who is a great teacher, as usual. With a serious look, Ray just observes her in silence for an instant. Hidden behind the bookshelf, two boys observe the conversation of the two attentively. Seeing that they were noticed, they run out, and Veronica apologizes for their shyness. She then explains that they liked him and dream of becoming hunters. Changing the subject, he asks if they can switch places to train. Ready to start, Veronica kneels in the center of the training room. Closing her eyes, she starts to concentrate her energy around her. Standing beside her, Ray realizes that she improved her control greatly. There, he remembers that his only method was telling her to go faster. Concentrating all her energy, she focuses on the creation of her circle. Even sweating, she says that she still hasn't done enough to achieve the result. Having a memory, she sees her grandfather lying in bed without much time. But now, she understands that she has someone beside her looking after her. Tightening her own clothes, she repeats that she needs to go faster and faster. Because of this, she remembers the happy moments with all her family. Determined, she shouts that she wants to correspond to the expectations of them all. Suddenly, her mana circle finally starts to fill with power. With an exhausted face, she says relieved that she managed to complete the process. Seeing her tiredness, Ray puts his hand on her shoulder to support her. Then she bows, warning that she is fine and it was just the tension. He just stares at her, surprised by her reaction after the training. Holding his shirt, she thanks him for all the help he gave. Crying, she explains that she only succeeded because of his presence there. Without understanding anything, he observes the girl continue crying in front of him. There, he advises that she should show the circle to her grandfather. Running upstairs, she calls him by name, asking him to follow. Then she asks if he wants to go along, but he questions the reason. With a smile, she says she succeeded because of him and that they should go together. Pulling him by the hand, she guides him animatedly upstairs. While climbing, he observes her continue smiling during the entire way. Arriving in the hallway, the two stop in front of the room door. Without hesitating, she knocks on the door to announce that they arrived there. Opening the door, she warns her grandfather that she is entering the room. Excited, she calls him by name and starts to say what happened. But suddenly she stops walking and stays completely immobile in place. Seeing that she stopped, Ray calls her by name, looking in the same direction. There, upon looking inside, his eye widens at what he sees. Inside there, Graham was fallen over the table, completely without movement. Without moving, she only manages to whisper her grandfather's name. As the sun rose, a new day began in the city. Graham slowly opened his eyes. He had been unconscious for quite some time. Seeing Ray beside him, he commented that the boy had finally awoken. He asked how long he had been asleep. Ray replied that it had been 2 days. Realizing his own condition, Graham said he didn't have much time left and asked about Veronica. Sitting beside the bed, Ray just stared at the empty chair in the room. Graham remarked that she didn't have the courage to see his final moments. He then thanked Ray for accepting his request to learn magic. Ray replied that their interests had merely aligned at that moment. Calling the boy strange, Graham announced that this would be the final lesson. After thinking for a moment, Ray prepared to ask his last and most important question. With a serious look, he revealed that he couldn't feel any emotions. Unsurprised, Graham responded that he already had suspicions about this condition. Ray explained that he needed to focus just to feel a limited number of them. He questioned if it was a disease. Graham told him it could be a condition of the heart. Explaining further, Graham said that hearts could close off due to trauma. He then commented that Ray's case might be different because he was choosing emotions. Changing the subject, Ray asked what type of magic the old man had been using. He explained that Graham always understood his intentions without him needing to speak. Laughing, Graham was amused by the idea of that being magic. Revealing the truth, he said he was merely reading the boy's expressions. He pointed out that Ray had tiny reactions that even he didn't perceive himself. According to him, even the smallest reactions could be considered an expression. Offering advice, he suggested that Ray practice reading people's faces, but Ray replied that he couldn't differentiate faces. They all looked the same to him. Ending the conversation, Ray opened the door and left the room in silence. Standing at the top of the stairs, he looked down at the living area below. Downstairs, he found Veronica sitting alone at one of the bookstore tables. Calling out to her, he saw her lift her face, her eyes welling up with tears. Bluntly, he warned her that her grandfather didn't have much time left to live. Crying, she said she didn't want to see her grandfather depart like that. He then warned her that this was her last opportunity to speak with him. Climbing the stairs, she finally decided to go to the room. In a rush, she ran down the hallway, shouting for it not to be too late. Arriving at the bedroom, she entered desperately while calling his name. In the corner, the two boys were crying and calling for her amidst the situation. Lying in bed, Graham called her weakly by name. Still awake, with a smile, he said he was happy she was finally there. Unable to speak, she just stared at him for a brief moment. With a big smile, she told him that she finally managed to build her circle. Extending his hand, he said he always knew she could achieve such a feat. Then she held his hand affectionately, calling him by name. In that moment, she remembered he had held her hand the same way before. In a flashback, she recalled him promising that she would never go hungry again. Crying, she said she was very happy when he invited her to come along, asking them not to worry. The boys guaranteed they would be okay. He replied that he wouldn't worry about the future of any of them. After all, he said he already knew very well how strong they were. From the door, Ray silently watched the final moment of that farewell. After some time, the scene shifted to a cemetery on a rainy night. There, it was explained that Graham was buried in the sector's largest cemetery. Back home, Veronica watched the two boys sleeping in silence. Then, Ray approached her while they both stood at the door. She thanked him, saying it would be hard to move forward alone. Observing her energy, he realized that Veronica wasn't crying. Without understanding, he questioned what kind of expression she was making. Then, he remembered the advice about not perceiving people's faces. According to the advice, he shouldn't view the face as a single thing. Instead, he needed to focus on each individual feature of the face. Putting the advice into practice, he finally managed to see her expression. Suddenly, a tear ran down his own face as he observed her. Touching the tear, he realized that he had also started crying along with her. Unable to handle the situation anymore, Veronica collapsed and fell to her knees on the floor. With her hand on the ground, she whispered her grandfather's name amidst her tears. Seeing her despair, he approached and embraced her to provide comfort. Holding her in his arms, he just watched her in complete silence. With his hand on her head, he kept trying to calm the girl down. Kneeling on the floor, he held her in a sincere and long embrace. As they departed, Jonathan shouted out. He told Philip he had to come back and visit someday. Packed and ready, Ray and Philip got into the car to start their journey. Checking the rearview mirror, Ray asked if Philip had told them the departure time. Sitting beside him, Philip confirmed it was set for 10 o'clock. In another scene, a surprised Veronica questioned the invitation to join them. Ray confirmed the invite was for her to come along with him and Philip. He thought about how useful her knowledge could be. Surprised, she said it was too sudden, mentioning she had her brothers to consider. But Ray assured her the hotel staff could handle everything. Offering another solution, he suggested Kedrick and his men could watch the shop. He asked her directly if she didn't want to leave that place. She asked if it was that obvious. Ray calmly confirmed it was. Stepping back, she said she needed time to think. Back in the car, Philip noted it was already 10 a.m. Wasting no more time, Ray shifted into gear. He said they had to go. In the distance, Jonathan watched the car leave. Realizing they were really gone. Running frantically, Veronica screamed for them to wait. With all her might, she yelled, begging them to take her along. Seeing her, Philip said she'd been hiding and they should stop. But she shouted desperately, telling them not to stop, just to leave the door open. Ray told Philip to take the wheel for a second, surprising the boy. Outside, Veronica kept running toward the car door. Opening the back door, Ray reached out his hand and told her to grab on. Exhausted, she looked at his outstretched hand. Then, she looked up at him with a smile, ready to take it. Without hesitation, she gripped his hand firmly to pull herself up. With his help, she managed to jump into the moving car. Inside, Philip commented that she decided to come after all. He then asked why she told them not to stop. Smiling, she explained that if they had stopped, she felt she wouldn't have been able to leave. Watching the scene in the rearview mirror, the two men remained completely silent. Smiling, Ray noted she was even more scared than he was. After a few hours on the road, Philip and Veronica were throwing up on the roadside. Feeling nauseous, Philip complained his stomach was still turning. As night approached, Ray announced they would camp there. Setting up camp, he lit a fire to warm the group. Sitting before the fire, Ray revealed his goal, finding the rainbow. Surprised by the revelation, the other two stared at him, waiting for more explanations. Veronica asked what exactly this rainbow was. Setting his food aside, Ray prepared to explain everything in detail. Sitting nearby, Philip explained that the rainbow is a gem of infinite mana. Furthermore, Veronica confirmed that Merc Red is also looking for the fragments. Philip concluded their investigation would focus on that organization. He then warned that if they continued, their lives would be at risk. Offering a way out, he said they could turn back if they were afraid. Smiling, Veronica let him know she'd faced death a few times before. Philip volunteered to handle the finances, and Veronica volunteered for the magical aspects. Watching this, Ray realized the great courage his two friends possessed. Observing from behind, he understood their determination was much stronger now. Seizing the moment, Philip revealed his great goal was to find his mother. In a flashback, He recounted how she left for another sector to earn money. During that farewell, she asked him to wait, telling him she loved him very much. He said she promised to return, and that was why he was saving money. Hearing the story, Veronica began to cry. Ray told Philip to calm her down. Drying her tears, she revealed her goal was to complete her grandfather's research. According to her, the research was about the black rain, which causes many diseases. Determined, she promised to finish the research so no one else would suffer like he did. Both Ray and Philip immediately offered to help with whatever was needed. With all objectives on the table, Ray confirmed they had a deal. Everything decided, the two faced the journey with new purpose. Calling for Ray, Veronica tried to get his attention for what she was about to say. Excitedly, they agreed they would count on each other from now on. Extending their fists toward him, they invited him to join the gesture of unity. But Ray dismissed it as a meaningless action that didn't strengthen them. Seeing their confusion, he complained that his hands were getting too hot. Setting his spoon aside, he seemed to reconsider his stance on the gesture. He joined his fist to theirs, saying they should count on each other. With big smiles, the two happily agreed to the group's new union. Back in the car, they remembered the warning about their lives being at risk. Suddenly, a herd of strange creatures charged angrily in their direction. Seeing the danger approaching, they were startled by the speed of the first attack. Out in the middle of the desert, they wonder how many days have passed. Ray informs them they've been traveling for 9 long days. Thinking they're close, Philip calculates the time should be the same as before. Looking out the window, he notices something strange approaching on the horizon. He points to a dust cloud, asking what it is. Inside the dust, a herd of creatures advances with menacing looks.
Desperate from the chase, Philip screams, not knowing what's happening. Veronica explains those creatures are called stone deer. Confirming what she read, she says their skin resembles a shell. Despite their appearance, she warns they are usually docile, but their migration pattern is wrong. Ray concludes something must have happened to scare the herd. With nowhere to go, he realizes they can't turn back or move forward. Then, he orders Veronica to prepare a complex defense around the car.
Concentrating her energy, she begins creating the shield as instructed. Terrified, Philip shouts, warning everyone that the creatures have finally arrived. With no other choice, the deer advance and start attacking the car with everything they have. With a firm grip on the wheel, Ray prepares to face the herd head-on. Seen from above, the car is struck on all sides by the animals. Scared, Philip yells as the magical shield starts cracking from the blows. Ray tells her to use all her mana to strengthen the defense. With all her might, she screams that she's trying and the shield can't break. Eyes closed, she continues struggling to keep the barrier up. Seeing the situation, he realizes she'll run out of mana very quickly. Then, he asks if Philip really wanted to learn how to drive. With a determined look, he states, "Now is the perfect chance." Desperate, Philip takes the wheel, yelling at him not to let go now. Planting his feet firmly, powerful energy begins emanating from his body. Climbing onto the roof of the car, he prepares to face the herd alone. Looking back, he observes the chase, ready to start his attack. Suddenly, one of the deer starts transforming in the middle of the herd. Surprised, his eyes widen as he realizes what's happening further ahead. He announces he found the reason for the deer's desperate flight. On top of the car, he tells Philip to keep going in that direction without hesitation. Suddenly, one of the deer is hit and completely disintegrates in midair. Seeing the scene, both he and Philip are shocked by the unexpected attack. Meanwhile, Veronica starts bleeding, showing the limit of her strength. Philip yells desperately that she's bleeding, and Ray perceives the danger. Understanding he can't create a shield, he decides what to do. Desperate, Philip yells, warning that the barrier has finally shattered completely. Without the shield's protection, he is totally exposed, right in the middle of the attack. With wide eyes, he stares at the herd, unable to move from that spot. At that moment, the car is hit and thrown violently to the side. From inside, Veronica screams his name, terrified by the whole situation. Seeing only smoke, she says she can't believe what is happening. Shocked, her eyes widen upon seeing what happened to the car. Amidst the dust, Ray manages to get up after being thrown. Seeing he's okay, she screams his name in complete relief. With a serious look, he decides there's only one thing he can do. Using his ability, he reinforces the car with his metallization magic. He then orders Veronica inside, assuring her she'll be safe there. Then, he tells Philip they are close and he needs to keep going. Speeding down the path, they manage to pass through the herd of deer. After a while, he stops the car and asks if everyone is okay. Looking back, he sees all the deer fallen on the desert floor. Questioning if it was them, Veronica says their hides are too hard. Checking closely, he says Veronica is right and that they were shot. Analyzing the wounds, he wonders what children would be doing there. Suddenly, a man approaches from behind and asks if they are lost. With a smile, he asks where the adults accompanying them are. Looking closer at them, the man says he notices something interesting. Noticing the youth's faces, he comments that they are quite cute. Unfazed, Ray asks for the distance to Sector 48. The man gets irritated by his tone and lunges at him, but with a surprise attack, Ray hits him squarely in the neck. Grabbing the man by the hair, he throws him to his knees on the ground. Handing the weapon to Philip, he tells the boy to hold it firmly. Then he orders that on his signal, Philip must cut his throat. Terrified by the order, Philip screams, disbelieving what he just heard. Philip held Jonathan hostage, threatening the group of men with a knife. He kept the blade pressed deep, ensuring the man couldn't escape. Veronica watched as Philip seemed to hesitate for a split second. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself to follow through with their plan. Philip grabbed the hostage by the hair, screaming for everyone to freeze. Watching the scene unfold, the men muttered that these kids looked like dangerous thugs. Arriving with his crew, a new leader demanded the boy let the hostage go. But Ray ordered Philip to cut the man, just enough so he'd survive. Obeying the command, he made a quick slice across the hostage's neck. Seeing the blood, the leader's group shouted that the kid actually attacked him. Smiling, the leader admitted they didn't have good intentions anyway. He sneered, asking what they intended to do about it. He warned that with one word, his group would wipe them all out right there. Ray stared calmly at the leader, preparing to show his true power. Challenging the man, Ray summoned multiple spheres of fire around himself. Surrounded by flaming orbs, Ray dared the leader to try something. Terrified by the raw power, the man realized he was dealing with a real mage. Immediately, he and his men bowed, apologizing and begging for mercy. Ray stated he just wanted some answers before leaving. Asking what they were doing there, he learned they were searching for something. Crossing his arms, Ray revealed he already knew they were after a deer with a blue stone. With a serious look, Ray demanded the man spill every detail. Awkwardly, the leader began explaining the situation with his strange client. He said the client was John Greed from Sector 40. A flashback showed John Greed facing an emergency in the desert. Almost out of strength, he crawled through the sand, desperate for anything to drink. That's when he looked up and saw the apparition of a celestial deer. The creature had a blue stone, and John wanted them to find it. Back in the present, the leader confessed the whole story sounded absurd. Ray, holding his knife, asked where he could find this mysterious client. The leader smiled, replying it would be very difficult to find him right now. Ray kept staring at him, his reflection visible in the blade. But mid-lie, a stone flew through the air, cutting the man's face. With his hand outstretched, Ray warned him. He had told him not to lie. Surprised, the man wondered how the boy knew his intentions. He realized that Ray somehow could read his every move. Revealing the truth, he said the client was at Hotel Gallo in Sector 48. Ray asked if they caused the stampede, but the leader quickly denied it. He explained they just followed the herd, which was moving earlier than expected. From the side, Veronica commented it was a shame they didn't have transport vehicles. Agreeing, Ray said he had just one last request for them. Relieved, the man smiled and asked what he needed done. Slapping his hand on the car, Ray said their actions had put them in danger. He explained that their car might have been damaged because of it. Ray called Philip over, asking him to suggest a price for repairs. Surprised, Philip asked if he meant him, and Ray confirmed. Celebrating, Philip said they closed the deal, getting 250,000 shillings. Pocketing the cash, Philip said it was all Ray's, but Ray replied they would split it. Veronica was surprised, but Ray explained it was to avoid future arguments about money. He said it was better to settle everything fairly from the start. Hearing the explanation, the two agreed, understanding the logic behind it. Suddenly, a small blue creature appeared, poking out of her coat. Ray stopped walking, fell silent, and stared at the two behind him. Then he finally asked what that thing was she was holding. Awkwardly, Veronica tried to find the right words to explain the situation. Showing the past, the creature was alone next to a larger deer. The little animal was crying, looking completely lost and scared by everything that happened. Philip said he thought it was dangerous to just leave the cub behind alone. Back in the present, Ray asked if that was why they wanted to take it. She begged to keep it, saying she already named it Fran. Philip asked how she knew the gender, and Veronica said it obeyed her. Even with the explanation, Philip still thought taking the creature was trouble. Thinking it over, Ray analyzed the situation for a moment before deciding. He remembered seeing an adult deer when he was on top of the car. Connecting everything with the story he heard, Ray finally decided to take the creature along. Happy with the decision, Veronica hugged little Fran with a huge smile. The next day, the group finally reached a new sector of the unknown city. Philip asked about Fran. Veronica replied that he was sleeping, well covered. Philip mentioned he'd locked the car and told them not to worry about a thing. Suddenly, two men appeared, blocking their path and demanding a talk. In an aggressive tone, one asked who gave them permission to be there. He then questioned if they had paid the toll to pass through that territory. Sometime later, the chaos in the street finally seemed to end. With the men already defeated, Ray asked who their leader was. He heard it was Renard. He sent a message for the leader to meet them at the Gallet Hotel on 22nd Street. As the men fled, Ray commented that this was already the 6th time. Veronica complained, wishing they would stop, but Ray didn't think that would happen. Analyzing the situation, Philip explained that gangs couldn't just ignore outsiders like them. Just then, Veronica pointed somewhere, seemingly having a new idea in mind. Inside a store, she explained that new clothes might prevent more fights. Agreeing with the idea, Ray also put on a formal suit for the occasion. Excited, Veronica asked Philip what he thought of her new outfit. At the counter, Philip asked to have their old clothes stored in the shop next door. Then Ray asked how he got a discount, and Philip replied it was a secret. With their new suits, they continued their way through the streets of that unknown city. Using his ability, Ray perceived a different energy coming from the people around them. Realizing the change in people's gazes, he reflected on the power of the clothes they wore. He then asked Philip if there were other ways to change one's presence. Philip replied that the first impression is always based on visible appearance. Continuing his explanation, he said a person's atmosphere is the most important thing. He focused his gaze, preparing to give a very clear example of this. Pointing at Ray, he said Ray looked like much more than just an heir. Suddenly, Veronica stopped and announced she had found the hotel they were looking for. Looking up, Ray commented that he had never seen a building that tall. When Ray started to enter, Philip tried to stop him, asking him to wait a bit. Philip suggested they straighten out their story, but Ray guaranteed they wouldn't get caught. Arriving at the hotel entrance, they encountered an imposing, serious security guard. Watching the group approach, the security guard stared at them, leaving the two quite tense. With a slight smile, the man allowed them to enter the premises without any issues. Already inside the hotel, Philip commented, relieved, that the plan had actually worked very well. Then he asked how Ray knew the security guard would let them pass so easily. Ray explained that he hadn't felt any hostility or distrust coming from the man at the door. Going to the reception, Philip greeted the employee behind the counter. Asked what they wanted, he said they forgot their room number. When asked for the reservation name, he heard that their grandfather was named John Greed. Confirming the information, the man said the room was 207, and Philip thanked him. Following the hallway, they finally found the door with the number 207 engraved on it. As Philip prepared to knock, Ray praised his trickery in getting the information. Suddenly, a man opened the door, catching everyone by surprise in the hotel corridor. Telling them they had the wrong room, he heard Philip say the mercenaries had sent them. Explaining the situation, Philip offered help finding the deer they were looking for, but the man warned that the representative was busy and couldn't receive them right now. Realizing the situation, Ray prepared to use his skills to solve the problem. Using his vision, he managed to sense the presence of 4 people inside the room. Just then, the man warned he would use force, ordering everyone to leave right now. At that moment, Veronica noticed a strange disturbance in the air around them. Preventing her from doing anything, Ray began to manipulate mana with his hand. He prepared to attack without hesitation to get inside. Suddenly, a voice from inside the room asked him to stop that. From inside the room, an older man called them young guests and invited them in. Reprimanding the doorman, he ordered him to let the group pass peacefully. Finally, inside the room, they followed the man to start the conversation with everyone. Extending his hand, the older man asked them to make themselves comfortable. Sitting in his armchair, he prepared to start talking to the group. Identified as John Greed, he asked if they wanted to know about the animal they sought. As the representative for Colonel Water, John Greed runs a business in Sector 40. Telling his story, he remarks that clean water used to be much more expensive back in the day. Ray then asks if the Elton River was already dirty back in those distant times. John confirms the water was murky, not much different from how it is today. Sighing, he begins to remember how everything was during his difficult past. In a flashback, he reveals he was a nomad, expelled from the sector along with his people. Because of this, they wandered the desert, always searching for the next available oasis. With survival at stake, they depended on finding a new oasis to live. Seeing a companion fall, he hears someone say that this would be the end for all of them. But young John tells him it wasn't the end of the line just yet. Looking at his people, he promises he will find an oasis and return. Determined, he sets off alone on his journey through the vast, endless desert. After walking for a long time, he finally faints from exhaustion, collapsing onto the hot sand. Without strength, he tries to get up, but his body can no longer move. Exhausted, he remains lying on the desert floor beneath the starry night sky. Despite his exhaustion, he continues dragging himself across the burning sand of the endless desert. Completely drained of strength, his body finally collapses onto the ground, unable to move any further. Lifting his head slightly, he sees something falling right in front of him. That was when he looked up at the sky and saw a celestial deer magically appear. With a blue stone embedded in its forehead, the creature seemed to be looking directly at him. Unable to believe his eyes, he just watches the incredible scene unfolding there. Just then, the deer joins a herd of other deer that had appeared. Then the creature lifts its head, as if calling out for something. Shielding his face, John sees the entire herd following the deer's call. Reflected in his eye, the scene showed a true miracle happening right in front of him. Led by the deer, they arrive at an oasis with clean, crystalline water. Feeling rain begin to fall, he realizes that he has finally been saved from that whole situation. Back in the present, he says he founded his business at that very same oasis. Holding up the bottle, he explains that he understands the pain of not having water. As he finishes the story, the group remains seated, listening attentively to every word spoken. He goes on to say that the water source dried up and competition increased. Ray then comments that that's just how things work because of money. Seeing how families fought, John decided to abandon the water industry forever. He reveals that now he has only one last wish before departing this world. With a distant look, he says he just wants to thank the deer as a farewell. After hearing the story, the group gets emotional and decides they will help him. Suddenly, Ray surprises everyone by saying they will help him in this search for the deer. Even with his friend's surprise, he confirms that he will find the animal for him. Appreciating the sentiment, John seems a little suspicious of the group's offer of help. Asking who they are, he hears Ray reply that they are just simple mercenaries. Ray's two companions are completely shocked by the lie he told. John Greed just listens to the answer, appearing to analyze the situation very calmly. At that moment, knocks on the door interrupt the conversation. Entering the room, the leader of the mercenaries says he needs to inform the representative of something. Seeing the group there, he realizes they have already arrived and told the story. Apologizing, the leader explains that he revealed the details, but John reassures him right there. Then John turns and asks Skyle for his opinion on the young mercenaries. Laughing, John remarks that it's not at all common to see mercenaries so well dressed. Skyle clenches his fist tightly upon hearing the representative's words about them. While the leader bows, John continues the conversation, unaware of the tense atmosphere. Adjusting his vest, Ray understands that the situation has become complicated because of their clothes. To avoid any suspicion, they should have come in much simpler clothing. John then asks if it's impossible for a mercenary to dress that way. With his hand on his collar, Ray prepares to give a definitive answer. Laughing, John says it's not impossible, but it would be something very unusual. He explains that most mercenaries have weapons and experienced combat skills. Suddenly, lightning magic expands through the room, startling everyone. Frightened, the men in the room watch the energy spread throughout the environment. With electricity in his hand, Ray asks if this was the type of weapon he was talking about. Shocked, the cloaked mage asks who they are, since he didn't sense his magic. Ray just stares at him with a serious look, saying no words at that moment. The mage then realizes that Ray is very powerful, being a second circle user. Ray asks if that's proof enough, and John screams that he understands, begging him to stop. Energy crackling in his hand, Ray asked if that was enough proof they were mercenaries. Supported by Mikhail, John confirmed the proof was more than enough for him. Asking Mikhail to calm down, he noted that no one had been hurt in the scuffle. Although annoyed, the mage agreed to the representative's request and stepped back. John then asked if they really intended to help him with his special request. With big smiles, the trio confirmed they would definitely be a huge help. John just silently watched the group, thinking over their proposal. Turning to Skyle, John asked for his opinion, since he ran the operation. The mercenary leader stared at the group, pressured to make a decision. Smiling, Skyle replied that he accepted, thinking about a mage's reliability. He explained that having a mage would be a big help, and everyone reached an agreement. Outside the hotel, Philip asked if this was really safe. Thinking back on the mercenary, they remarked that the leader definitely hated them now, but Ray explained they would investigate the city while he looked for Fran's parents. Reflecting on Skyle, Ray felt the hostility but didn't think he would act on it. Thinking about what happened, Ray realized the hostility wasn't aimed at him, so he turned and asked Philip about John and Skyle's relationship. Remembering the scene, Philip replied that John seemed to trust Skyle quite a bit. He said it was hard to draw conclusions, so Ray asked for Veronica's opinion. Agreeing, she said John didn't seem to know the request was being ignored, but Veronica added that John Greed seemed like a great person after all. Hearing her words, Ray remained silent, reflecting on the story. Suddenly, a group of men appeared, one of them pointing at Ray. The gang leader demanded they hand over all their money right now. Just then, a gold coin flew through the air, surprising two of the gang members. Tossing coins upward, Ray snatched one out of the air with a quick swipe. Holding the money bag, he asked if they knew how much was inside. Curious about the situation, the gang leader asked how much money it was. Ray then revealed it was 1,000,000 shillings, leaving them all shocked. He invited the group to continue the conversation in a nearby alley. Giving an order, Ray said that to earn money, they had to do what he told them. With the gang already defeated, he told them not to waste energy fighting him. Holding up 3 fingers, he explained he needed to find out 3 things in the city. Then he listed a rainbow, black rain, and a middle-aged woman. Looking down on them, he ordered them to report daily with any new information found. Raising his hand, One man asked what the promised reward value would be. Ray revealed the reward would be 100,000 shillings for the best information. Hearing the proposal, everyone agreed excitedly at the chance to win the offered money. After the agreement, the men ran off to start searching for the requested information. Warning his friends, Ray asked them not to walk alone in the city for safety. Looking sideways, he seemed to reflect on his teammates' security. Veronica's ring was composed of a very specific and powerful type of mana. This mana was linked to the wind element, increasing speed and mobility. Furthermore, the ring's power also allowed her to summon the wind. If determined, Veronica could create wind blades to attack enemies. Looking at the two, Ray asked them to extend their hands toward him. As they joined fists, a magical seal appeared on each of their hands. With the mark now made, the three were connected by a special spell. Veronica explained excitedly that he had just used the Unity spell. She continued saying the spell allowed them to sense each other's location. Philip then commented that he couldn't use mana, but Veronica told him not to worry. Asking him to stay close, she got a little flustered in her explanation. Then Ray said he needed to go somewhere, asking them to go back alone. As they walked away, Veronica shouted, asking him to return to the hotel soon. Alone in the alley, Ray told whoever was hiding there to finally come out now. Coming from behind the wall, a voice said he didn't intend to keep hiding. Then Skyle emerged from the shadows, saying he was just waiting for the right moment. Ray stared him down, asking what he wanted to discuss. Smiling, Skyle said he wanted to talk about plans moving forward. Placing his hand on his chest, he asked if they could go somewhere else. Without looking away, Ray analyzed the man's proposal for an instant. The scene shifted to a bar where a beer mug slammed onto a table. Holding the drink, Skyle excitedly shouted that the round was on him. Once in a private room, he asked what Mr. Mage would like to drink. With a serious expression, Ray replied that he just wanted a simple glass of juice. Skyle held up his beer, joking that alcohol was like a magic potion. Smiling, he added that the drink turned people into animals. He took a sip and noted that kids couldn't drink. Ray didn't react. Ray silently drank his juice. Then he said he would introduce himself properly. Skyle formally introduced himself as the commander of the mercenary company. Ray briefly used his ability to analyze Skyle's mana. He realized Skyle was highly materialistic, focused entirely on worldly possessions. Smiling, Skyle asked which mercenary company Ray belonged to now. Surprising Skyle, Ray replied that he hadn't decided on a name for his company yet. Laughing, Skyle understood that Ray was just starting his mercenary career. Skyle thanked him for keeping quiet, saying it avoided serious problems. A flashback showed the chaos if John had discovered their intentions. Ray asked if he was still tracking the deer. Skyle confirmed he was. Chin resting on his hand, Ray continued listening to the mercenary leader's explanation. Ray asked him to stop the hunt, making an unexpected proposal across the table. Ray explained it would be a problem if the deer got caught in the crossfire. Surprised, Skyle questioned what Ray had just said about their hunt. Then, with a smile, he asked for the real reason behind the request. Sensing hostility, Ray pointed his finger down, preparing an attack. He fired a spell that blasted the beer mug into pieces. With an intimidating look, he asked if Skyle had any complaints about the decision. Scared by the power, Skyle stammered that he had no problem with it at all. Composing himself, he said he was just curious about the motive. After the show of force, the man's hostility seemed to decrease significantly between them. Clasping his hands, Ray warned that the hunt could only continue after he left. Skyle agreed to the condition, saying it wasn't a hard request to follow. Ray asked when they were leaving, and Skyle said they could go tomorrow. Changing the subject, he invited Ray to eat at the best restaurant in Sector 48. Then he downed his mug in one gulp. With the table full of food, he offered to help register Ray as an official mercenary. Watching Skyle, Ray wondered how far the man's greed truly went. He considered using 5 million shillings as bait to provoke him a little, but he discarded the idea, realizing the risk of exposing his assets so openly. As he ate, he reflected on the flow of mana and its different uses. Watching Skyle, he questioned how mana flowed through human emotions. He wondered what would happen if he poured more mana into a container. With a flick of his finger, he manipulated the mana, sending it towards Skyle. He channeled energy into a piece of food Skyle was about to eat, but the attempt failed. The man was already full of other strong emotions. Making a fist, he decided he needed to be a bit more forceful. Concentrating his mana, he prepared for another attempt to influence the man. A small burst of energy occurred, releasing the power he had been accumulating. Skyle stopped suddenly, as if he felt something strange happen to him. Ray started speaking, saying that if Skyle signed a contract, his head would feel better. Confused, Skyle began feeling sick, asking if he had drunk too fast. Feeling the magic's effect, Skyle said he couldn't stop thinking about money. Hand on his face, he wondered what was happening to him right then. Seeing the reaction, Ray decided to continue with the plan to manipulate the mercenary leader. He asked if he could earn a lot of money by joining the company. Hearing Ray's words, Skyle focused only on the possibility of profit. With open arms, he replied that with Ray's skills, they would make a fortune. Extending his hand, Skyle invited the mage to join him and his company. Watching the scene, Ray realized his manipulation was finally working. His golden mana had consumed Skyle's emotional container completely. Excited, Skyle said they could take everything from John Greed, getting millions or billions. Ray said John wouldn't carry that much cash, suggesting it was somewhere else. Skyle then revealed the old man's fortune was in the underground Ignis Bank. He explained that with the company dissolved, the Ignis card was his only asset. Skyle asked how they would get the card, taking a paper from his inside pocket. Placing a photo of the deer on the table, he revealed his plan for the team. Looking at the photo, Ray recognized the creature as a stone deer, but he denied it, explaining that the one in the photo didn't have the jewel on its forehead. Asking if the photo was fake, he heard Skyle quickly confirm it was. Then Skyle said they would use the image as bait to get the card. Chin in hand, Ray continued listening to the mercenary